We are back from our recess. Let the record reflect that Director Randall and Director Wells both have excused absences for today. We are ready to continue with our agenda. We will start off with agenda item number 17, Basin Directors Reports. We will start with the Colorado River Mainstem Director, Director George.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to you and good morning everyone else. I'll join others in thanking the Department of Agriculture for hosting us. Not only do they have a beautiful facility, but everybody we meet in the halls is so friendly and inviting, as of course we'd expect. But it's always a pleasure to be invited by friends into their workplace and to be hosted as nicely as we have. It caused me to recollect or reflect, and I guess maybe this is what retired old people do, is you spend more time thinking about the past. I don't know, but yesterday as I was leaving, I had a chance to visit with the gentleman at the front desk who's been helping us. And of course, I could see the old file Rolodex that's sitting over there by the door, if you all know what I'm talking about. I swear to God that I can remember that from when I was 5 years old. And the story, it has to be 5 years old, because in those days, if you were a livestock grower anywhere in the state, you probably put your cattle for sale on the train at the nearest depot, which we did in Rifle, and they would come to the stockyards here in Denver. And we did that in those days. Now, you'll laugh at me when I tell you that I think it was still a steam engine, because the diesels, if you look at the history of trains here, the diesels were just coming in the mountain. This was the late 1940s I'm talking about, early 50s. Anyway, the memory I have is when Dad went into the livestock exchange, that same building that these folks had been in for years. And I can remember that, and I can remember that Rolodex. And so it gives me a fun feeling to always see that. I always go look for it wherever I'm around the Department of Ag. So there you are. I've proven that I'm getting old and senile, but it's nice to be here. So let's talk about what's going on in the Colorado Basin Roundtable, because we've just been through the much assailed reconstruction of the Glenwood Springs Bridge. The Basin Roundtable chose in September and again in November not to hold our meetings south of the river as we always have in Glenwood Springs, so we could just avoid the congestion and the problems that having no bridge, no main bridge, would cause. By the way, the bridge is done, so the worry is over. It's as grand and beautiful as it should be. It's really nice work. It looks good. And the first thing you notice is how wide it is, because remember, the old bridge is really dangerous. So it's all been worthwhile. I think the community has breathed a sigh of relief. But what it did for the Basin Roundtable is it sort of gave us the initiative to get out into the field and look at some of the projects that we've been funding. So in September, we went up to Kremling and held the meeting there at a ranch family hosted us there, Boucher family, you know Paul. And then drove up to almost to Hot Sulphur Springs for the Windy Gap project, and we got a tour there, saw their facility, and walked the river where we could see where the new channel will be and what listen to the description of what the engineers are planning to do. Got a really good feel of what that new project will be, what it'll look like when it's done. Went back downriver and saw several of the features that have been constructed out in the irrigating areas of the river. And this story you know from Paul that we've been working on for a long time and have funded, to see how that was working. And mostly, of course, you'll love this when I tell you that their structures look like rissets. So there is something good about a risset, apparently, when it helps irrigation. And this seems to work. They built several of them, and you can see them. It's just naturally giving the river a chance to lift itself in the periodic locations. If you didn't know what you were looking for, you wouldn't see it. But you can surely see the value in the riparian areas where they've had them operating, and then looking downriver where they're yet to construct. So it really brought that whole concept home to all of us that had a look at it. So we really enjoyed that. Then our regular bi-monthly meeting will be this coming Monday, and we're going to go the other way to Palisade and Clifton and Orchard Mesa and look at those features there. The Orchard Mesa Irrigation District has been helping to operate the Grand Valley Power Plant. I think that was an Excel operation all these years, but the water effects and relationships were Orchard Mesa Irrigation District. And I think Excel has either sold it or intends to sell it. And the plan is to keep it in operation because it's critical to the whole water scheme of that part of the river. So we're going to go look at that. While we're in that area, we're going to stop by the Clifton Water Treatment Plant. Apparently they have state-of-the-art or advanced water treatment operation that we're going to see how that goes and learn about that. So then I think after that, we'll be back to our regular business meetings in Glenwood. But I think the touring is always a good thing, just as we do that when we can too here. So keep it up. The rest of the business of the Basin Roundtable is what you'd expect. I counted 5 applications for WSRF funds. So chances are we'll see those here later. And then the regular PEPO grant needs and requests and other business. The Basin Roundtable continues to be, the meetings are well attended. There's still lots of energy and interest, and that's really what it's all about. The river, we had a lot of good information yesterday on the Colorado River. I really enjoyed and I learned quite a lot of the pieces that haven't been quite clear in my mind over the years. I got several of those connected yesterday from the information. It kind of seemed to me like we had been given the syllabus of a semester course in the Colorado River water law in the course of about 2 hours. And I got pretty nervous towards the end because I knew there was an exam coming. So the exam occurred, I guess, at the tap room, so all's well. Great job. Thanks everyone for setting that up and doing that. Well, you just couldn't get that presentation any other way. Just wonderful. And we'll probably need to do it again because things change and it's tricky. You have to keep learning it, has been my experience over my career. Well, anyway, I just wanted to highlight the numbers that underlay all this. And so as of October 3rd, and you've probably already seen these because the staff puts them in our books, but I like to highlight them. Like me, this is as of October 30, 2 weeks ago. So mead is at 39%, and that's where they've been keeping it. Powell is at 60, and it's been 60%, and it's been up and down over that. The total system then is 55% of active storage. And that's to be compared, I think, with the 2016 active storage was essentially the same time period. 2016 active storage was 50%. So for this moment in time, we're up a little. And the forecasted flow into Powell, so forecasted, I guess, means for the next water year, it's 110%. So we're still benefiting from all of the snow from last year. I didn't have anything to compare this with, but the numbers for lower basin consumption no, this is forecasted. I'm sorry, forecasted for this water year. So it's not quite done. For the whole southern or the lower basin, they're going to consume 6.6 million acre feet. So that's an interesting number, I think, but I don't have numbers to compare with it. So just always like to see that long view. So now the news that you've all been waiting for, just couldn't end the year without it. But I have hot off the press the Old Farmer's 2018 Almanac, the original Farmer's Almanac, and quote, useful with a pleasant degree of humor. Not bad. In 1792. So I won't go into all the fun things that are in here, but I went right to weather for winter 2017-2018, and winter is defined as November through March, so we're in it. And it shows a line right down the Continental Divide. And the east side will be mild and snowy this winter. What more could you ask for? Except for the west side will be cold and snowy. And we like that. We're tougher over there. But the most interesting point of this is that north of the state, going all the way into Canada, it's mild and wet. And the only place in Colorado that's included in the mild and wet is North Park. Now, I would think our chairman would be pleased with the mild part of that. Mild probably means not colder than 40 below.
That's true.
Is that right?
That is true.
Okay. And the wet part is great. So anyway, that's, and we know this is unassailable, so count on this. The summer 2018 news is not good. The west side is cool and dry. The east side is hot and dry. So we get even with you by summer. So there you are. If you'd like to have one of these, I know where to get them. Amazon, like everybody else. Thank you. That's it for me.
Questions for Director George? Thank you. Let's move to San Juan, San Miguel, Dolores River Basins. Director Hawkins.
Well, first of all, I wanted to thank our hosts here and also the hosts for the tour, which I found very interesting. I've done a little bit of treated water or drinking water work, and so I found the tour really fascinating. I will pick up where Director George left off and talk a little bit about the weather in southwestern Colorado. We've had a very dry fall. We are currently at 38% of normal at our snow-tell sites across the basins. And so I'm very excited to hear that the snow will be falling soon in our basin. We had a basin roundtable meeting on October 11th in Durango. I thought we had a really good discussion, especially around funding and the tag groups. And so the roundtable is very engaged on both of those issues. Since then, we had a busy day on October 27th. SGM put on their fall forum in Durango for, I think, the first time, and had a lot of really good local speakers, including Ellen Roberts. It was a really good discussion of water issues in southwestern Colorado. And then the same day, the Dolores River Native Fish Monitoring and Recommendation Team met to discuss the preliminary results of monitoring around the release. And so it was a really good discussion. We had most of the researchers that had been out in the field come in to talk to water users and county commissioners and land managers about the work that they were doing in the field this year. I thought that I would spend the rest of my report highlighting one of our tributaries in the basin. Sometimes it's hard to get information from all of the tributaries into a report, so I thought I would focus on the Mancos Basin today because there's a lot going on. So one piece of news is that there are two ditch companies, the Weber and the Root and Ratliff Ditch Company out of Mancos, that have submitted applications for the salinity control funding with reclamation. And this was done with the assistance of our technical assistants out of the CWCB. And they were able to put together really solid competitive applications with good salt numbers because of our technical assistance. Both of the ditches talked to the shareholders, and the majority of the shareholders were in favor of the project. So those are two fairly large projects that, if funded, will be going on in the Mancos River Basin, hopefully in the near future. The Mancos Conservation District is doing a lot of work in the basin. They have an outreach and education plan for the next couple of years that's focused on gathering concerns about sustainability and water values, and looking at water conservation needs and looking at concerns around drought and shortage planning. The Mancos River Resilience Group continues to do work. The Mancos Conservation District has applied for a watershed restoration grant, and their technicians have spent over 4,000 hours doing on-farm projects and outreach in the basin. So there's a lot of really good work going on with the Conservation District. There's going to be an event in 2018 partnering with the Old Fort Lewis, doing a demonstration day. That sounds really fun. I'd like to attend. And the Montezuma School to Farm program has a new director. That program currently is serving 2,300 students in the area, and they're looking at targeting 3 more schools for gardens and heritage orchards program. So it's really great. The kids get a chance to actually get out and work in the gardens and work in some of the heirloom apple orchards in the basin. So again, that's just a snapshot of what's going on in one of our basins. I'm really excited to see that work going forward, and I think you'll be seeing some funding applications coming in from the Mancos Basin soon. That's all I had for my report.
Questions for Director Hawkins? Thank you. Let's move to the Gunnison River Basin. Director McLeod.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. And I also would like to thank our hosts here at the Department of Agriculture. It's a great facility. They could bump up their Wi-Fi just a little bit. In the Gunnison Basin, quickly, we had a good overall season in terms of reservoir storage. We've got optimum storage at Taylor Park Reservoir, and we've set our fall flows in the Taylor River at 100 CFS, and that'll hold until the 1st of April. Blue Mesa is more full than it's supposed to be, which I guess is good news. The Bureau of Reclamation has an annual icing target. They're supposed to reduce the storage in Blue Mesa Reservoir to a certain elevation to prevent the river from backing up and icing into the subdivisions on the west side of Gunnison. They're a little behind schedule on those releases, but they just raised them last week, so they'll probably make it by the end of the year. We had a very dry fall, just like in the San Juan Basin. When I left Gunnison Monday, it was 64 degrees, and there's not one flake of snow anywhere in the valley. Up above 8,000 feet, we do have the beginnings of snow. The resort plans to open the ski slopes on November 23rd, so we can ski the ribbon of death of man-made snow, but they're optimistic about the season. Our roundtable met, the roundtable this year changed over to every other month, and it did meet on October 2nd, I guess it was, the first Monday in October, and I've been on that roundtable from the very first day, and for the first time in that history, we did not have a quorum at the roundtable, so very little business was accomplished. I was very disappointed, and several of us harassed the roundtable members by email and by phone to say, you know, if you're going to do this, you need to be serious about it and show up, because we can't conduct any business if there's no quorum. So that's disappointing news, but I think we'll rally to the cause. I want to focus on something else now that the Upper Gunnison River Water Conservancy District is doing, and this board awarded us a $175,000 grant. The district is matching that funding in this effort, and it's about watershed management planning. I'm going to pass these out, and you can glance at them while ignoring what I'm talking about. But we have put together this watershed management planning group. It has great representation from all interested stakeholders. A month ago, a couple of us went to sit down with the board of directors of the Gunnison County Stock Growers Association and encouraged them to become active formal members of the planning group. They agreed, and the planning group has now scheduled a regular monthly meeting in the evenings. The stock growers are sending 2 formal representatives. These meetings are open to the public, by the way, but we have a core working group. Monday night, we held a public information session at the local fairgrounds, and the idea was to introduce the public at large to the process. We advertised in the newspapers and we put up posters around town, and the younger members of the group said, social media is the way you get the word out. And so, Andrew, go ahead. We put this on our website and distributed it through YouTube. It's amazing what free pizza will do. Now, whether it was the social media message or the advertising or just getting the word around the community, we had 75 people approximately turn up for this meeting in Gunnison, and the agenda is there in the folders. We passed these out to everyone, encouraged them to fill out those questionnaires. The process is designed around initially just 3 of the sub-basins in the Upper Gunnison Basin, the East River, Ohio Creek, and Lake Fork of the Gunnison River, which is the Lake City area. Each of them has a sub-basin coordinator. They are on contract to the district, although one of them became a director of the district, and therefore we had to take her off contract, and now she's a volunteer. But they are meeting individually with the stakeholders. It's a kitchen table discussion. 95% of our consumptive use is agriculture, so those people are key to the process. And as I said, the stock growers have bought in formally to the process, so we think that will work. The coordinators were introduced and gave a little talk about exactly how they're going to go about it. These questionnaires are also available online on our website. We're getting a fairly good return rate on the questionnaires so far, but when the coordinators go out and sit down with the stakeholders, which includes not just the ranchers, but also the municipalities and the other water providers and so on, and they take these questionnaires with them and ask, sit down and do a one-on-one conversation to fill out the answers. We also have hired Wilson Water Group to do a complete survey of all the consumptive use in the basin, and Aaron Wilson sits down with the water commissioner and they put the map of the diversion structures up on her computer screen, and she and the water commissioner will go through and make sure that they know whether that's an accurate location for the diversion structure, how much it diverts, what the diversion records show, what the irrigated land is, and make it accurate. She spent Monday and Tuesday of this week with the former commissioner for the Tomichi Basin, for example. She spent 2 days with the commissioner for the Lake Fork. And so we will have completely accurate data on all water use in the basin, which is important. You can't plan unless you know what you have. So that's an important aspect of the program, and that's coming along very well. And so far, we had a little bit of a bumpy start because particularly ranchers don't like you to plan for them. They'd rather plan for themselves, and we made it clear that that's what was happening. The planning part is at the ground level, not from the top down, but from the bottom up. All this all the district is trying to do is give them the tools to make the plan and make sure they have accurate information, but also to make them aware of the pressures that are occurring that we don't necessarily control. And that's why I was asked to talk about the Colorado River Compact issues at this hearing or at this meeting. And they're very interested about this big river effect on our water future. So at this point, as I said, it was a little bit of a bumpy start, but we have a great community buy-in, and we're very pleased with the progress so far. And that, Mr. Chairman, concludes my report.
Questions for Director McLeod? Thank you. We'll move to the North Platte. I too would like to say thank you to the Department of Agriculture. Always very nice. Also a shout out to our tour guides the other day, Lisa, Rick, and Ron with the South Metro Wise Authority system tour. That was extremely interesting. I really enjoyed that. That was I had no idea that what's going on just a little ways east of here, so it was pretty interesting. Actually, we've enjoyed a wet fall in North Park. Things are going actually pretty good. But as you've probably heard me say before, we really don't know what bad is. We just really don't understand that concept. But we're actually getting most of our fall projects with the ranching and other tourism type activities. Hunting season is still in full swing, but most of the ag operations are starting to wind down. It won't be too long before the ground will freeze, and that pretty much ends all construction and things like that. I definitely do appreciate Director George's weather predictions. Sometimes I wear my Smart Aleck hat, and I probably have it on right now, but I would attribute that to just all around nice people in North Park. That would be clean living, and I would attribute all our good successes to that. So anyway, but I will take my hat off now and kind of get back to reality a little bit. But anyway, yeah, things are good, and we're just kind of getting ready for hopefully a nice snowy winter and go from there. So, and that would conclude my report. Thank you. Let's move to the South Platte River Basin Director's report. Director Yon.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Another great day in Colorado. Sunshine. It's pretty exciting, but we have to be inside. Anyway, I'd like to thank the Department of Ag as well, and South Metro, Lisa, Darling, Rick, Marsasek. It's hard for me to say his name, and Ron Red. And it was a really interesting tour, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. And if you weren't on the tour, you'll have to sometime, if you get to tour Root or Hess, make sure you ask Ron Red about the 5-minute gate story. So if you haven't heard that, it's pretty interesting. So anyway, I won't go into that here. Some of what's going on in the South Platte Basin is our harvest season is winding down. Our fourth cutting alfalfa is about completed. I think most everybody has that up now, and the sugar beets are all out. Corn harvest is still ongoing. There's a few of the farmers that are still getting their final corn out of the field. So it's been a really good fall for that. It started out a little bit on the wet side for some of that harvest, but it's turned a little bit drier, and so they've been able to do that pretty successfully. And the yields are very good, very good. Some of the highest that we've ever seen. So that's good. The bad part is, of course, the prices don't match that. So the prices are down a little bit on the commodities. But the cattle prices are pretty good right now. So there's always a balance there, and there's ups and downs in the farming industry. As far as our roundtable goes, we had a roundtable meeting on Tuesday, so I wasn't able to make it to that. But we also had an update at the roundtable meeting from the South Platte storage study. If you remember, there was legislation a few years back about having a storage study on the South Platte Basin that was introduced by J. Paul Brown from Saline's area there. And So that's coming to a close. We had the final workshop on that at Leonard Rice Engineers on November 9th, and it all went well. The storage study looks really good. It's kind of a high-level storage study, but it's actually kind of got people thinking on a more regional level, and it's kind of introduced a little bit of excitement into our roundtable. So I think, we're kind of looking at this storage study and we're thinking, okay, now where do we go from here? So that's a positive thing that's coming out of this, even though it's pretty high level and it's not going to show us a lot of things. But it did compile a lot of data, and that's the good thing about this study. So one of the things, though, that you have to keep in mind out of this storage study is that it shows that there's water that runs out of the state from the South Platte above our compact obligations, but it's very hard to capture. So, you have times like 2013 where you have big flood events, and that shows a lot of water went out of the state, but there's really no way to grab that water other than an on-stream reservoir. And that's just a difficult thing to permit nowadays. So other than an on-stream reservoir, you have to have diversion structures that can withstand high flows, and then you have to try to capture what you can. And so when you have a flow of 20 to 30,000 CFS going down the South Platte, you can't build an inlet canal for that, because that only happens a very few times. So maybe you have an inlet canal for 500 or 1,000 CFS. You can take a little bit off, but even when it's flooding, most of the time you just want to stay out of the river because you can't really do anything down in there. So that's the thing to keep in mind. I know a lot of people point to the South Platte and say, well, you guys need to use all your water before you do anything else. And that's what we're trying to do. And another thing that you look at is the water available near Kersey, because that's where the study started, is maybe 200,000 on average, 200,000 acre feet. The water that goes out of the state is 350,000 acre feet. And that's because we dry the river in several points. And kind of to point to that, I wanted to show you once again our South Platte, Lower South Platte Water Conservancy District. They have real-time data that's going on right now. So if you see up here at the Kersey gauge, we have some kind of flow. I can't read it, for 1,080 or something. Okay. I need better glasses apparently. So we have 1,080 at Kersey. We have reservoirs that are taking water. We have Riverside Reservoir. We have Jackson Lake Inlet that's taking water. I believe we have Empire Reservoir that's taking a little bit because they're about full. Jackson Reservoir is about full. So the reservoir storage is good. And then you get down to, sorry, Eric, I'm pointing at your head. And then you get down to our reservoir. We have 508 CFS going into our reservoir. And then you have Pruitt Reservoir. And at the Pruitt Reservoir, we have 115. Our inlet canal can hold 695, but that's all the water there is in the river. So we're taking all the water in the river at the Pruitt Inlet Canal. Then we have some recharge going on downstream of that. Andrew, if you want to scroll all the way down to the state line. So we have going out of the state line what is it? 254. Okay, thanks. 251 going out of the state at the state line. So we're drawing the river upstream. We still have 251 going out of the state, but we're at Kersey. We had 1,080 flows. We're diverting 1,600 total from Kersey to the state line. So it just shows you how much once again, the return flows. And if you want to click on the point flow, it's a little easier to see in graphical. So you can see here, this side is Kersey I can't see my pointer now. Anyway, on the left side is Kersey. And then the blue is river gauges, and then the others are ditches that take the water. So you can see at Kersey, there's this, Riverside's taking some, Jackson's taking some, the river increases again. At North Sterling, we're taking this, Pruitt drops it all the way down to nothing. And then the river gains as you go downstream all the way to Julesburg, where you once again have 251. So the only other thing, so that's kind of how our river works in the wintertime. And that's why you can't capture everything that goes out of the state. We just don't, unless you put something right at the state line, you just can't capture it. So that's all of this point flow model that Lower South Platte has was used in the storage study as well to determine water availability. So, but it's all good information, and we look forward to going on from there. I heard on our roundtable that this Tuesday that we had, I don't know, 3 or 4 stream restoration applications that came that they gave letters of support to, but one of them was on the Republican River. So it was kind of exciting that we don't see a lot of things come out of the Republican River that bring things to us. So the Republican River is looking at actually doing a little stream restoration in the Bonnie Reservoir area. So, because we can't fill Bonnie Reservoir anymore. So they're looking at what could we do with that. And so they're going to do a little stream restoration in that. So it's kind of exciting about that. So I guess finally is just the reservoir storage is good in our area. But one thing I guess I wanted to bring up because Director Ryan mentioned it yesterday, that going into the South Platte, there's a lot of things going on, and the river commissioners do a lot of work in the South Platte. When I started at North Sterling in the wintertime, we had reservoir storage, and that was it. So you had 6 reservoirs that stored in the wintertime, and those when they would get full, then you had a couple reservoirs, North Sterling and maybe Riverside, that would divert in the wintertime. And now, since we have all these augmentation plans, you'll have ditches along the South Platte that never ran in the wintertime that now are in good weather will take water to augmentation ponds. And off those ditches, you may have 20, 50 ponds that they fill for augmentations. Each one of those has a recorder that the Division of Water Resources has to go out and grab that information every week and put it into a spreadsheet. So what once was about 6 diversions is now up in the hundreds of diversions that the Division of Water Resources now takes care of every winter. So it's kind of hard to even to help people understand the massiveness of the change in that arena of all the things that you guys do. So I just want to say thanks. And, I heard you went all the way around the state and everything, but you guys do a lot of work in our basin, and I really appreciate it. So thanks. Oh, and just one last thing I forgot to tell you. I gave a talk for the Colorado Livestock Association on Tuesday morning before I came up here. And so I was looking for something to use to kind of update people on the water plan. And so I texted John Stolp, and he said, well, why don't you just use the story map that the CWCB has put on? So I went and I used the story map. So I just want to thank the CWCB staff for that. It was great to use and a great way to educate the public just using that storage map, and it's updated, periodically. So it's a nice thing that any one of us can use to help educate. And then the last thing is, I just wanted to clarify something, because in Andrew's water news that he sent out, one of the headlines is from the Sterling Journal Advocate about me talking about the water plan, because we don't have a lot to talk about in the Sterling Journal Advocate. So anyway, but I was quoted as saying, I'll just read it here. He also briefed the symposium on several projects now underway to help provide additional municipal and irrigation water, but said none of them will do much to close the water gap in Colorado. I didn't actually say that. I just want to set the record saying every little bit. I was talking about NISP and windy gap firming, some big things, and they're going to do a lot. And I don't know how that came out like that. But anyway, so I just want to set the record straight. So thank you.
We were going to talk about that later.
Director George.
Just a quick question. I really like this display and your description of how the river works. That's, I think, unusual, and it's nice to learn about it. But I wanted to point and ask about your comment of the 200 plus going across the state line. and that the only way we could benefit from that is to capture it there and then do something with it. I just wanted to ask if any compact requirements or endangered species issues would require that to flow out of Colorado anyway.
Yeah, that's a good question, because we do have a 3-state program, Wyoming, Nebraska, and Colorado, with the federal government to provide flows to the endangered species in Nebraska at North Platte. So we do have those issues. We are able to store additional water under that agreement, but we couldn't ever capture it all. I mean, that's still ongoing, some of that discussion, but and I'm not as familiar with a lot of the ins and outs of that endangered species agreement between the 3 states and the federal government, but I know that there are some limitations there. But as far as in the wintertime, we have no obligation to Nebraska under our compact.
Okay, good. Thanks. That helps.
Any other questions for Director Young? Dr. Stahl.
I think the flow requirement, I looked at Kevin, it's 140 CFS during the April to October.
120.
To 120. So that's the period that we're expected to deliver that much. That's why a lot of irrigators can get called out lower end of during the irrigation.
Right. It's like an 1897 decree, and it's 120 CFS from April 1st to October 15th. So once October 15th comes, we can use whatever we need.
So the same effect must be going on in the other states, that the river is just helping itself and it's creating its own flows, so that this isn't going to dry. If you took the 200, it wouldn't dry up the river very far.
Right. No, that's correct. And that's one of the reasons that Nebraska even agreed to the compact, because Colorado convinced them that we're only getting better because of all this development that we're doing upstream.
Thank you, Director Young. Let's move to the Arkansas River Basin. Director Goebel.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And when Director Yon told us that story this morning, I told him one way to avoid being misquoted is just to tweet it, and but to not do it in the middle of the night. So I'd also like to thank the Department of Ag for hosting us this week, and the folks from WISE for the very informative tour of the WISE system on Tuesday. And special congratulations to Laura and Riss and Brent Newman for their new positions. The Arkansas Basin Roundtable has met twice since the September CWCB meeting. At our October meeting, Greg Johnson came down and presented an overview of the SWASI update and the tag process. And this was followed by a good discussion by the roundtable that further explained and clarified the details about the technical methodologies being used. And Greg also let folks know that the SWASI models are being developed to allow for more basin-specific adjustments to be made during the future update to the BIPs. So that was helpful to know, just because I know SWASI can't dive down into every detail, but for folks to know that we'll have an opportunity to turn the knobs a little bit for the Arkansas for our BIPs, just to kind of dive down a little deeper. That was helpful. The Arkansas River Compact Administration will hold their annual meeting between Colorado and Kansas representatives December 6th and 7th in Lamar. And Director Mitchell will be attending as one of the 3 Colorado reps on the administration. A couple of the larger items that will be discussed will be Colorado Parks and Wildlife will be asking for approval of a second year of the resolution passed last May that allowed them to add a new storage water right to the John Martin Reservoir Fish and Wildlife Permanent Pool. They've had limited water in that permanent pool in years of drought, and it's been an issue. So that was big news, and took several years to get that accomplished. Also, Colorado will be presenting a proposal to ARCA to add a new 40,000 acre-foot storage account to John Martin Reservoir, which is being called the Colorado Water Users Account. This proposal was developed over the last year and a half or so during phase 1 of this project with support from a grant from CWCB severance tax operational account. So that was very much appreciated. And phase 2, which will be ongoing, will include meetings with Kansas to discuss the details of this proposed account and the potential benefits that it could provide to both states. So we're looking forward to that. The Winter Water Board of Trustees for the Arkansas River met for their annual meeting last month in La Junta and heard an update from the DWR and the Bureau of Reclamation on storage conditions in the basin and forecasts for the winter water storage period. So with the current plans for winter water storage operations, and if we see average precipitation, which you almost never see average, but last year was pretty close. If we see average precipitation through the winter months, Pueblo Reservoir will have a high probability of spilling this coming spring and maybe even this winter sometime. And depending on how and when this occurs, it could also lead to John Martin Reservoir into a spill situation. Those are our 2 major lower reservoirs. So several groups have already started moving water out of Pueblo Reservoir and trying to find places to go with it to private reservoirs. And just this morning, we started a recharge project where several of the augmentation groups are running recharge water into ponds. We're trying to learn from the South Platte. They have a lot of recharge operations, and we just have caught on that might work out well for us. Usually our reservoirs aren't full, so so we're kind of trying to look into new ways to make it work. So, and then also a couple of the canals are being experimented with to try to use as recharge structures. So raising some checks up in the canals and filling them a portion of the canals to try to send recharge into the ground so we can use it later on. And to ultimately, those are all trying to lessen the spill from Pueblo Reservoir. Pueblo Reservoir is currently storing 216,000 acre feet, which is 18% above what it had this time last year and 40% above average. And it's the most it's had this time of year since 1999. So like I said, kind of an uncommon situation. Now, if we take a look at this chart, so the scale on the left doesn't go all the way to 0, but I zoomed it in so we could get a better picture. So this orange line is the max conservation storage. So water above that goes into flood pool and would spill. So as you can see, November 15th, which is the start of our winter water season. So irrigation stops and water is stored for the next irrigation season. The max storage available for conservation jumps up to a little over 311,000 acre feet. And that continues through April 1st, where it drops down over a 2-week period down to 245,000 acre feet. So, and they call that spike there, that jump, the joint use pool. So we're allowed to store into the flood storage until that mid-spring time when runoff and floods may happen and then drops back down. And so the Bureau of Reclamation did a projection of what possibly could happen with all the knowns that they have right now for this upcoming season. And I tried to mimic it as close as I could, but Andrew, if you advance the next slide there. So this is pretty close to what they were projecting. So you can see the blue line is possible storage. And who knows what's actually going to happen, but this is pretty close probably to what it's going to be. So if anytime when the blue's over the orange, that's water spilling out of the reservoir. So you can see we're looking at possible 20,000 acre foot or more of spilling. So that's kind of a big deal. And so that's why all these recharge operations and whatnot are happening to try to avoid that. And I think I put some arrows on there just to highlight that.
Nice.
Thank you very much. timing's a little off, but hey. And John Martin Reservoir is currently storing 252,000 acre feet, which is 160% above what it had this time last year and 270% of average. So fortunately, it still has about 80,000 acre foot of storage available. But I thought it'd be interesting to show this graph I put together of the last about 38 years of storage in John Martin Reservoir. And so this goes back to 1979 through today, or yesterday. So you can see that the red line is the top of the conservation pool. So anything above that spills. And so I guess the point is John Martin Reservoir has a lot of storage available in most years. There's a couple of stretches where we've spilled. The last time that we spilled was February of 2000. So it's been a little while, and you can see that big drought through the early 2000s there. And we had that miracle May in 15 that spiked us up, and we've kind of held steady for the most part since then. I have one more slide on here, Andrew, that shows this 40,000 acre feet proposed storage account that we'll be presenting to ARCA in a couple of weeks. And that's the full 40,000 acre feet. So we don't expect that to be full right away, or maybe even for a long time if this account is approved. But just wanted to point out that there's a lot of opportunity for storage in that vessel. And so hopefully we can eventually come to some sort of an agreement on that. And with that, that will conclude my report, Mr. Chairman.
Questions for Director Goebel? Dr. Stahl.
And how much of that spill?
If what will spilled?
No, if John Martin spills, isn't that where it comes out? Where's it out of?
If John Martin Reservoir spills, what water would cause it to spill? Is that?
Where would some of that go to the Great?
Oh, no, if John Martin spilled, it would, because John Martin's below the Great Plains, so it would just go downstream and I guess could be picked up by Colorado users or Kansas. But it's so far down in the system that there's not a lot of opportunity below there to pick anything up, unfortunately. Other questions?
Thank you.
Let's move to the Rio Grande River Basin. Director Dutton.
Thank you. Thank you to our hosts. This is a great facility. And thanks to all the staff who have worked so hard and to keep the good work of CWCB going, and also worked so hard to put together reports and updates for us to consider. I think, I know that some of you guys stand up for 10 minutes, but I know it probably took you hours to put together your reports, and we really, really appreciate it. So in the Rio Grande, the irrigation season ended on November 4th. And so that means that the diversions from the river and the well pumping is off for the season unless people apply and get a variance. But overall, nobody is using water right now legally. We entered into storage season following the end of the irrigation season. And so that means that there are a number of ditches that have recharge decrees. And so the water that is available is then diverted out into those ditches and used for recharge in the aquifers. Now, I believe the recharge season is also over. So the reservoirs are in storage, and all remaining water, we're kind of similar to the South Platte, and that there's a fair number of return flows this time of the year. So the water that is in the river at the state line is going for compact obligations. Since we're in storage season, there's a big drop in the releases from the reservoirs. And so Trout Unlimited has been partnering with a lot of organizations in the Valley for the last few years, and they have created a winter flow program. So I think we're in our third or fourth year of this really exciting program where the group that's come together, that's made up of DWR, different water districts, water users, and CPW especially, and pretty much anybody that's interested, comes together, and we identify water that has some flexibility, both in its decreed uses and the timing of those uses, and then we allocate some of that water to be delivered over the winter. So this year, Trout Unlimited has helped coordinate retiming of flows for improved winter conditions below Rio Grande, Beaver Park, and Plateau reservoirs. and this has a great benefit to the fisheries. And I should have brought some slides, but seeing some of the monster trout that have been pulled out below Rio Grande, I think it's making a difference. So it's a really neat program. There's great buzz in the basin about the well rules and regulations trial and the draft Forest Service plan, which I think we all heard enough of yesterday, although I can start reading the plan if you guys want to really get this report going. I really appreciated the updates on these topics. So thanks again for the staff for the very thorough updates yesterday. Very exciting. The radar project continues to move forward. So we have 12 parties now, which include the various counties and water districts and water user groups that have signed a MOU that commits these parties to participate in bringing the project to fruition. We also have draft language about operating. So just kind of who's going to do what and where the money will come from for annual operations and how that's all going to look. In addition to the incredible commitments from CWCB for technical and financial assistance for the project, CDOT has come to the table and they've pledged matching dollars. And CDOT is also seeking funds through the Capital Development Committee, which is a really neat development. There is a hearing at the Capitol on December 19th that members of our core team working on this effort will plan to attend. And I know Joe Busso really wants to be there, and we really appreciate all of his efforts and would appreciate his attendance at this hearing, just in case there are technical questions on the radar. Last, our roundtable formed a stream management plan committee, and they submitted a grant through the Watershed Restoration Program Fund on November 3rd. And so this grant will kick off the physical assessments and goal setting for the Conejos River, the Rio Grande, and Saguache Creek. So I think we were told you shouldn't do more than 6 miles, and we said, nah, we're going to do 300. So a coordinator for this effort has been identified, and there's a great deal of enthusiasm for the effort and all the partnerships that will go into it. That's my report.
Questions for Director Dutton? Thank you. Let's move to the Yampa White and Green River Basin Director's Report. Director Gallagher.
Good morning, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, and many thanks to the South Metro District for that tour of that area. I remember when Hamden was the entry to the high plains, and it's now, it looked like a sea out there, and I'm not sure where it's going to stop, but I was tremendously impressed by the response of the larger metro community to try to supply this growing part of our metro district. And I'm not sure where it stops, but or if it will ever. But I'm very pleased to see that the communities come together to try to address it. And I was really impressed by the scale of the facilities. Being a small municipal provider at one time myself, when you scale these things up, it's quite an impressive show. So many thanks to them. Also, thanks to the CDA for their providing this room here. This is a great place and very convenient for all of us, whether we're coming from the mountains or the plains. In the basin, up in the higher elevations, we've been fortunate to have 4 snow events since the first week of October. So, and they've been followed by warming trends, which is also nice, a little Indian summer each time. And so we've, the rivers are running, both the White and the Yampa are running just about along the median for this time of year, which is good. And we've have the stagecoaches ceased their releases out of the reservoir there for the Yampa, the steamboat run. In the roundtable, last week, Wilson Water held a workshop for roundtable members and the subcommittee for modeling the Yampa and the White. This was their fourth workshop and was really more of just cleaning up some of the additional questions from our third workshop. The subcommittee directed Wilson Water to start writing up a report. So they presented us with an outline of that report and hope to have a presentation for us at our January or March meetings. So we're very pleased with that progress. At the roundtable last week, the Rio Blanco district updated the roundtable on their project, and they're hoping to their storage project down there in the White River, and they are looking to begin the permitting process sometime in 2018. City of Steamboat also came to the roundtable and updated the roundtable on their progress. They've completed their data gathering efforts along the 13-mile reach through Steamboat, and they have held 2 workshops so far on gathering input from the community to try to frame that plan so that they with the input of the community. They're hoping to have a draft report out in March and have it presented to the City Council for adoption in May. The roundtable also held elections, our biannual elections to fill vacancies and elect officers. Jackie Brown, who most of you know or some of you know, water policy advisor for Tri-State, will serve as the chair in Mary Brown's position. And Alden Vanderbrink of the Rio Blanco Water District and Mike Camblin of the Juniper Water Conservancy District will serve as vice chairs. Jeff DeVere, our long-serving IBCC representative, has resigned from his position, and so former county commissioner and current Colorado River District board member Tom Gray, who did serve as chair of our roundtable, will serve in his stead. On projects above Hayden, the efforts continue to restore the reach above the Gibraltar ditch to improve the river habitat and the connection of the ditch to the river so it can receive its decreed flows. Craig Gaboo and I visited the site last week and saw that they were almost finished with the project, and I believe they'll be finished up by tomorrow. So, Mr. Chairman, that's my report.
Questions for Director Gallagher? Thank you. At this point in time, this concludes our Basin Director's reports. We will move to agenda item number 18, financial matters. Good morning, Steve. How are you?
I'm excellent. Yourself?
Good. Doing
Don't
well.
like the traffic coming up here, but oh my God. Let's see. How does this go on? Can you help me out here, please? Thank you. That's mine. Excellent. Now I'm perfect. Thank you, Andrew. I think it's on. Nope. Well, almost perfect. Good now. Okay, thanks. Or does it go this way? Doesn't like my hand. All right. Well, while we're taking care of some technical difficulties, you're a good man. This is agenda item 18A. My name is Steve Biondo. I'm CWCB staff, and I'm going to be presenting the financial statements for you this morning. In your notebooks are the complete reports prepared by Clifton Larson Allen. And if you haven't had a chance to look at them, there's very good for some light reading tonight when you go home before you go to bed. So please, if you have any questions after that, don't hesitate to give us a call. If you have any questions while I'm going through this, you can interrupt me. It might be easier, or just wait till the end. Whichever you guys prefer, it's fine with me. With me today is Paul Niedermuller, and he is a partner at Clifton Larson Allen. And I'd like to thank Paul and his team of experts that compiled the financial statements together for this year. They've been doing it for several years now and have been doing an excellent job and have been coming back and taking care of that for us. And I'd also like to thank our CWCB accountant, Steve Schull, for his continuing efforts to help make sure that our numbers are always perfect. When we put together, I should say, the construction fund, we put together all of the funds. So we separate these financials into two parts. One is construction fund, one is severance tax. So severance tax stands on its own. Construction fund includes everything like litigation fund and flood response fund and all those. So we compile them all into one statement because in our accounting system, they're all done separately. So we like to just put them together, give you two statements. So let's get on with the construction fund. And we made it. We went down quite a bit this year in revenues. Federal mineral lease is pretty stable. All the rest of the items are pretty stable. As you can see, our numbers are a little inflated just because we have a lot of severance tax transfers. Over the past several years, the board has decided to transfer funds from severance tax into the construction fund. Those are mainly for, or used to be, I should say, mainly for the Chatfield reallocation project. And now we've included water planning and other items in that in those transfers. So this year we ended up with $30 million as opposed to $54 million last year. And in case I didn't make this clear, I just do kind of a little extraction of the parts that I find that I think are important to you. So if there are any questions on either the statements or these slides, let me know. Operations are down a little bit. I know that looks pretty funky, but we have some pretty productive staffs. Several people are taking on 2 jobs at once over the past year. We've lost some staff. So the numbers are down just because of the way it's been going here. We are now filling up our positions. We have a great new CWCB director and a new deputy director. So we're just filling up all the top positions and working out with some really good people. On our operations, we put in, the executive director's office, which is we give out money to the executive director to pay for our share of other agencies like accounting and purchasing, legal. Well, actually, legal is next. The executive director's office is what I meant to say. And we also give some other monies to DWR for both their operations. The $193,000 there is their operations. The $273,000 there is the satellite monitoring system that the state engineer works with Jeff Basler on. And then, as you can see, our non-reimbursables are going up, which is a very good thing because, if we started out the year with $104 million in non-reimbursables, most of that is attributable to the Chatfield reallocation project. About 51 million, I believe, is under contract, and the remaining 37 is still being worked on by staff. So we went up $5 million this year in non-reimbursables for total expenses of $22 million. And I'd also like to point out that, particularly for the new people that are here, in September of every year, staff puts together a non-reimbursable report. And you can see the numbers I just talked about right on there. And if you are interested in a project, want to know a little bit more about a project, or want to know, hey, why didn't my project get done this year? You'll know which staff to go to. You'll know how much they spent, what they're trying to do, what the pitfalls are, if there are any. So you can get some good information out of that report. And it's about a 50-page report. So, and it is in the director's report every September. Our income for the construction fund, and as I say, including all the funds, was only $8.5 million this year, down from 36. Primarily, that was because less monies were transferred in. Federal mineral lease stayed the same. The loan program stayed the same. P&I was basically the same. It's not a bad sign. When it gets to negative, then it becomes a little bit of a bad sign, but right now we're doing good. I also, in July, put in the director's report the loans that have been paid in full. We found that it gives you an idea of what's going on and how the loan program is doing. So as you can see, we had a big, huge payoff by the city of Aurora. They took out a $75 million loan. They paid us back $69 million in just principal alone. And the rest of those, Excelsior actually paid in full early as well. And the others are 30-year loans that were paid off. So we received $69 million in payoffs for this year in the construction fund. Moving on to the net assets, which we also called fund equity. Our loan program has gone down a little bit, basically, as I just mentioned, because of those loans paid in full. Animas La Plata Water, I'm sure most of you should be familiar with that by now. That is our investment, which the La Plata district is leasing water from us. Chatfield, the same thing. This is our reallocation program. And the Chatfield numbers will change too, because we put all that money into escrow, if you recall, and then they take care of the financing of it. They take care of the numbers. So we actually make money for our money in the bank. Thank God, you know, give out $45 million and not get a little bit back. So we have money that goes in, comes back to us. And then as the Chatfield mitigation people pay out vendors for the construction, and anything else that's going on there, that gets set up against the 45 million. So we've got a little coming in, a little going out. They just really started taking money in the past year. I think it was probably the spring of 2016 when they actually started, or 2017, no, 16, that's right. Moving on, we have $53 million of loan or various projects, including non-reimbursables, under contract, and 161 not under contract. And we came up with $28 million for available amount that we can start off this year with. Now, one thing to note about that $28 million, it is our accounting number. You will, in a few minutes, hear the budgeting number. What we do is included in that $28 million is our receivables. We earned so much money in 2017, so we have to account for it. That goes into that number. So then we have to back it out and give you a purer number when we say, here's how much we have for loans and grants. So this is going to be our starting point. And then Kirk can add in the revenue for the year, and we don't double dip on receivables. So it's nice and clean for you to make your decisions on. We ended up the year with $561 million, up from last year, up from both years. So we're doing very well in our fund equity. Little pie chart for you, 42% of loans still holding strong. It's what we want to see. We obviously can't give away more money than we're taking in. The loan program keeps that revolving cash going in and out. And that's what we want to keep up on. All right, so let's just move on to the severance tax unless anybody has any questions on construction funds so far.
Any questions? I don't believe so.
All righty. So severance tax, we'll start over with the revenue again. Revenue, as you can see, if you want to look back to 2015, it was like $67 million. And as you know, severance tax is so volatile, and it's a moving target, as Director George has got me to say. Ever since he's been our executive director, I like to use that terminology. Severance tax is a moving target. And as you know, there are BP got into a big lawsuit, and now we've got all these credits running out the door and stuff. So All of our severance tax people are trying to settle all that and resolve it. So, but last year we ended up with $16 million. This year, it may be close. We're hoping it'll be a lot more, but we'll see as the year goes by. Interest has gone down because we don't have as many loans going into severance tax. We transferred a lot of money out, so obviously you got to balance it too. So interest is down. Treasury interest is pretty much stable. As you know, we unfortunately have to keep like $60 million in there for the Arkansas Valley Conduit Program, and we can't like put it into a separate account or anything and make more money on it. So it actually does help, though, to keep our interest pretty stable. Someday they'll actually take their money and we can move on. Right now, they do have a contract for about $17 million, which you all approved last year. So we ended up with revenue at $21 million, just down a little bit from the previous year. There aren't very many expenses in severance tax. As you know, as I mentioned, all of our operations come from construction fund. So here we have one non-reimbursable, the Agricultural Emergency Drought Program, which is run by Taryn. And she has not had any requests. Actually, there has been no droughts declared, which is what's the key point for this. So last time we put out any money was in 2015. And as you can see here, our only other expenses for severance tax are the transfers. So this year we're down 10 million from 29 on expenses. So our net income for severance tax comes out to $10.8 million, is quite a bit up from last year of a negative $6 million. Now that kind of may seem scary to some people, but just to give you an idea, there's over $200 million in cash in the bank, and we have various projects that are earmarked. As you know, they all take time to get done. They can get done in a year, 5 years, or as in the case of Ark Valley Conduit, forever. So nothing to be worried about. The cash is going to be there. And as we'll point out shortly, you'll see it rolling in for the year. And the other thing, too, about cash is in your financial statements. The very last statement that we have there is cash. So you can actually see the real numbers. I just gave you a ballpark, and see what they are if you're interested. Because in your cash, you're going to see the outlays for the loans and the grants that make up all these other numbers. So it's kind of like I said, some nice, easy reading for before you go to bed. Severance tax, loans paid in full. We had $10 million. We did have 3 big loans that were paid early. Colorado River District paid off their $11 million loan. Little Thompson paid off 2 of their loans. Moving on to the fund equity or net assets. As you can see, as I mentioned, loans are going down just slightly. They should come up a little bit. One of the key things here is I know most of you are familiar with the South Platte flood that occurred, and our response to that was to have emergency money available for them, and we made emergency loans. We, with approval from the board, gave them 0% loans for 3 years. And now they're going to start coming back in. Most of those loans, their first payments are this year. So in December, in fact, I just started getting some already. In December, those loans will make their first payments. So you'll see that number will stay the same, but you will see the revenue stream picking up a bit now that the emergency loans are being repaid. Projects under contract, you can see, is $90 million. And not under contract is $74 million. And just to point out real quickly that Chatfield loans are now starting to take their money and move forward. So we'll once again start seeing some increases in revenue once they start paying back. WISE is in the construction fund. I'm sure you're familiar with that. And WISE is already rocking and rolling. They still have a couple of tasks that haven't started yet, but they're moving quite rapidly. So under Severance X, we've got $65 million, which was being transferred to or transferred out of severance tax this year, as opposed to $10 million the previous year. The $65 million, as you know, includes the loan guaranteed fund. And just for information, we put that guarantee fund in a separate fund. It's not hidden in an account in the construction fund. We kept it separately so that it could be easily identifiable. Have $10 million for water supply reserve fund in there, water plan, and some other items. Our available balance starts off with $44 million, which once again will be reduced a little bit down to, I think, about $36 million when you see those budget numbers. So we ended up the year in a good position, $400,000, almost $400,000 in severance tax. This shows you the pie chart. 41% actually is taken over the lead of the authorized projects. So we got a lot of money out there for projects that are either under contract or not under contract. They're waiting to get performed. Loans are down a little bit. That's the 31%. You can see that in burgundy. It's not too bad. As a finance person, I'd like to see it a little higher, but that's not always the case. We have to do what the water community needs. So any questions on severance tax so far? I got a couple more slides.
Questions? I don't believe so.
All righty. I like to put the financial performance indicators at the end. Clifton Larson Allen has put those together for us. Give us the insights on them. As you can see, we have a change in total net assets. It's down 1.5%, which isn't a terrible thing. It just means that we didn't increase as much as we would have liked to. I think many years ago, the board always said that we wanted to increase, our change had to be 3%. And for many years, we've actually accomplished that. Last year, we did not, but we're not hurting. Loans receivable to total net assets is down a little bit. Like I said, that'd be nicer if it was a little higher. Return on our investment, as you can see, because we have a lot of grants now, our return is a little bit lower than previously. The next item is delinquency rates. Last year, I want to back up. The industry standard is 90 days. It doesn't mean we don't have any late payments. As you can tell from the director's report, I usually put in the late payments, and they range from like 4 to 6. When I first started doing this program, they ranged from 50 to 70% late. So now we're 99% on time and only 1% late, which is excellent. I don't think anybody in the banking industry can say the same thing. I don't think anybody in the banking industry can tell you they don't have one delinquent loan that went past 90 days. Previous years, we did have one in each year. But everyone is current, and as just as a reminder, we only had 4 delinquent loans in the 30 years or 30 more years that we've been here. We started the program in 77, 78. Most of our loans took off in 1980. And we've only had 4 delinquent loans. All 4 of them have been handled. 3 were resolved financially, taken off the books. And then the last one, the board agreed to restructure it, and they're paying back, and they're actually paying back more because they want to get rid of it. They don't want to have that 30-year payment over their head. So they've got some good people in the town, and it's nice to see. Severance tax, similar things. The change is up a lot from last year. As I mentioned, it was just because of all the transfers out. It just went from one hand to the other, so it's not really a big issue. Loans receivable is down a little bit. Return is down. And we have not had any loans that were late longer than 90 days in severance tax since inception, which is back in 1995. So we have had, just out of curiosity, I went back this year and found that there were actually 2 loan payments that were late, but they were under 30 days, so they're doing well. So that is it on financials. Does anyone have any questions on those?
Questions for Steve? No, I don't believe so.
Excellent. The finance section nominated me to do 18B, Financial Policy 3 Change. So Steve Biondo, again, for the record, I guess I'm supposed to say that. This is a housekeeping agenda item, and it does need your approval. I can do it in 1 minute if you like, or I can tell you why the staff chose me to give the presentation. Since I don't see anybody saying shut up and just go to the recommendation, I'll just give you a little history on our policies. Because I think the policies are important to know, and I think it's important to know how they got developed, and I'll try to talk fast unless I'm talking too fast. As I just mentioned earlier, we started the loan program back in the 80s, and you know, I think a lot of us here have grown up with a handshake, gentleman's agreement, when we did things, and that's the way, you know, the country was developed on. And over the years, we're trying to strengthen those because not everybody abides by those rules. So since 1980 to about 1995, we just weren't concerned with whether or not the payments were late. In 1995, there was a state audit done on the CWCB's processes. I think they did it. They may have done it on other parts of DNR. I'm not quite sure. But that was why I was chosen for this particular position, because my background is in contract management and auditing. And there was a stack. I can't get this paper to stay there. There was a stack of audit recommendations from the state auditor that we needed to resolve when we needed to, you know, get things in line. And it wasn't like it was anything was really super bad. It was just housekeeping. And so in about 1999, the staff presented to the board the new policies. So we established our financial policies around 1999. I helped resolve all the audit recommendations, and then we moved forward. One of the things that came out of those financial policies was this one here, policy number 3, which wanted to give our borrowers the understanding that, you know, it's not a free ride. You know, you have some responsibilities to make your payments on time. It was never intended to be hammering, you know, the people or not. It was just there as a tool that we could or could not use. Because if you read what the contract says, if you read what the policy says, it says the CWCB may impose. What does may mean? May or may not. So we have the right and the flexibility to impose it, and we have the right to do it within 15 days, or if we choose not to do it in 15 days, well, we could still do it in 30 days. You know, so it's kind of like, may sound a little bit of an overkill to change this policy, but what occurred was recently the state controller's office decided to do their contracts over. So they called CWCB and they talked to our contracts person, Peg Mason, and they said, Peg, we're revising all the contracts this year. Aren't you happy? and you get to revise the loan contract template. So Peg got with finance staff, and we all put our little noggins together, and we said, okay, Peg, we think you should, you know, clean up this, or you can clean up that. And then we discussed this policy here, and this is the only one that needed your approval. All the rest were just contractual things. And we also discussed it with the state controller. State controller said, yes, we're going to leave the wording exactly the way it is because we don't want to change it. We want it to remain flexible for you. We want you to be able to handle your customers properly. But we are going to change that date to 60 days from 15 because it is an annual payment. And, you know, with your track record, do we really want to hammer on somebody over $100, $200 late fee? I mean, everyone here knows that we don't just do loans. You know, we do grants, non-reimbursables. We're giving out a lot of free money. It kind of looks a little awkward if, you know, the guy that's doing the correct thing, which I consider the correct thing, because the loan program is kind of my baby, you know. But so anyway, so you got the guy next door getting a $500,000 free money grant, and then you got the guy paying a $200,000 loan, and we're going to hammer on him for $100,000 or for $100. It doesn't quite make sense. One of the things I wanted to point out originally was in the first sentence, it tells you all that right there. You know, the last word is secure. We want to secure. We want to be able to keep control of the state's asset. That's my job. That's everybody's job in this room, is to protect the state's assets. But the first part of that is really important too. You know, we want a friendly lending environment, you know, and that's why we want a flexible policy so that our customers will be happy and they won't be calling the governor's office complaining about us. So that's about it. I mean, I could digress more. There's other stories that I had, but I think I'm probably running out of time.
Yeah, I think we got it, Steve. Yeah.
All right. So let me present the staff recommendation to you.
This is an action item on Director George.
So the concept of may assess within 60 days does not change to must.
Right. The lawyer in the state controller's office said it is may, because that's what we thought it might be. Actually, we thought it might be either must or will. And they went through this big, long thing, which unfortunately I forgot to bring with me, about the difference between the two. And may gives us the right to do it. And so that's what they wanted to have in there.
Great.
Further questions? This is an action item on 18B. Director George.
Mr. Chairman, I move we adopt the staff recommendation on amendment to Financial Policy 3 as submitted by the presentation and the documents in the file.
Second.
Been moved by Director George, second by Director Yon, to move staff recommendation as it was worded in the official record. Further discussion? Call for the vote. All those in favor signify by an aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it. Good report. Morning.
Good morning. Kirk Russell, CWCB Finance Section Chief. I'm going to close out agenda item 18. Thank you, Steve. I rely on Steve's not only his accounting skills, but his history in the loan program. And there are many times that we are dealing with something a lot of the staff will think, gosh, this is cutting edge. And Steve will remind us, well, we did that 7-8 years ago and it all worked out fine. So don't panic. Before I do jump into agenda items 18C, I want to introduce a staff member that the board has not met. Jessica, if you could stand up real quick. Jessica is our program assistant on the loan program, and she does a lot of the communications to the borrowers as the money flows in and out, and works with not only the project managers, but also Steve and the contracts person to keep things moving. And so very valuable in our section. Before I jump into the money side of what I'm presenting, and reminder to the board, I look at these kind of on an, I do look on them on an annual basis. What Steve presented was the history. So that was last year, what got us to the start of this fiscal year. And there's this lag time between the time we close our books at the end of June of the fiscal year, and then I start presenting what it looks like going forward, and those revenues that are coming in and the expenses that are laid out. So that lag time ended June 30th. The audit comes in, Steve communicates with me kind of what we assume things are going to be. And then at this time, moment in time, once that report is completed, the audit is complete, I now have a starting number that may be adjusted a little bit. We get loans that are repaid in full that came in that we weren't planning on, and some of that stuff gets corrected. And so that's, at this moment in time, now we're on the same page moving forward. A reminder to the board, we have a couple loans that are coming in. One of them is the largest that we've ever made. The $90 million loan that Jonathan will be presenting to the board, to the Northern Colorado Water Conservancy District, is in the numbers Steve provided because it was in last year's projects bill. It was already authorized, and so you won't see those numbers in here. That's already been cleared through this process. So the $300,000 one that he'll present is identified in this list. So to start off, the unrestricted balance that I will work with back on July 1st of this year, which is the beginning of our fiscal year, that's $16.9 million. We look at the federal mineral lease as it comes into the construction fund. We try to make sure that it stays consistent with what the projections are, and it is. We're on par with federal mineral lease rolling in, which is on line item 4. I will share with the board, and as Steve indicated, federal mineral lease is down considerably. It has been down over the last 3 or 4 years. When I became section chief, we were enjoying about a $15, $16, $17 million number. It was always a accurate number from a projection standpoint. And that number was really the fresh dollars coming into the construction fund. It was the one that we relied on for operations and non-reimbursables. And then we added in the interest that we were earning from that account. So that is about half today what it was 4 or 5 years ago. But it is consistently at about that $8 million number. And don't ask me why that's down. Maybe Director George has asked me that in the past. I don't have an indication of why that number is what it is. To note on line 11, 12, and 13, I do my best guess at what the anticipated new loans come in. I kind of spread that over the rest of the fiscal year to make sure that we have enough available in unreserved cash for those loans. That's about $12 million of available cash in the or available unrestricted money in this account. As Steve indicated, there's a significant amount of cash waiting to be utilized in the fund. I'm going to have you flip to the construction fund or the severance tax page. Starting number 36.5 million. Really, the biggest issue on severance tax, and we talked a little bit about it yesterday, is the 38 million shown on line number 4, and the uncertainty of that. I spoke to Director Randall a little bit yesterday afternoon as well, and they're paying attention to the revenue because it's part of that operational account portion that DNR utilizes for a lot of its activities. Not only I think is that 38 million suspect, it's easily half of that, if not lower. And so I'm using it. It is the September projection that it's the number that I use to make the board aware of where we are. But it's certainly a big question mark. And so it will affect the available funds, not only for project loans, but also non-reimbursables. I indicated that I feel comfortable that we will be able to fund the 25 million this year. It's a cash available situation, but because of those forecasts of severance tax, I think next year's 25 million is certainly in question. You go
Excuse
ahead.
me, Kirk.
Go ahead.
Director George.
Thank you for highlighting that, that's too high. And so even though I don't mind you put it in here, we know it's not real. So tell us where your other numbers become less than real, please.
Certainly, I think the question is, where do we squeeze if that number is not a reality? And I think the focus has to be on loan funds, unrestricted loan funds available. And I'm not going to say it's not something to worry about, because I think it's my job to let the board be aware of where we are with things. But the grand scheme here is that there is so much cash available in these accounts from projects that they aren't even contracted yet, that I believe there is no concern. The low revenues coming in, we will offset that as time goes on, making some adjustments maybe next year. Every year we say that we've got $40 to $50 million in loan available. Over the last couple of years, we've only needed about 20 million per year, until you throw in a $90 million loan that starts to balance that, or average that out to that $40, $50 million. But eventually, if this low severance tax revenue continues, then we would continue to dip into some of those long-term promises that aren't needed yet. But right now, I don't see that issue. If you were to take, let's say, $20 million out of this math, you're going to take it right out of the water project loans available for the next 3 board meetings before the end of the fiscal year. So that's the direct answer to your question.
Yeah. And of course, there's a caution to doubly spending restricted funds just because you can. But there's still restrictions. So at some point, you even though they're moving to funding slowly, they're still restricted, right? So you can't, that there's a pretty quick end game happening there. So I guess what I'm asking is, where do you think we get to where we're not loaning money? Because that matters to our customer base, and we have to start communicating that somewhere. What do you want us to do with that?
A lot of this has to do with timing. And if we think about the $25 million that is promised for the water plan funding, that goes into the projects bill, it's money available in July of 2018. By the time the board reviews those and approves them, we're probably halfway, if not even further, into 2018. So this snapshot in time, it has a significant delay in revenues. And so I've always paid attention to where we are. The question you're asking, at what point is there a concern that we're dipping into promises made? And I think we're quite a ways from that. I use the Ark Valley conduit as the message, not that it's the only project that has an impact on that question, but it's the big one, and it's the one that you can understand. And that particular project was approved back in, I want to say, 07. And I know we've been speaking to Southeast District regularly about when they would need those funds. We haven't even contracted for those funds, so they're not even made available to the district for that project. But I know that there is a need to make sure that that money is available. And so we've worked with the district to make sure they're comfortable with its availability. But even if that project were to be a go tomorrow, we have plenty of cash for that and all of the other things that we have. It isn't until probably a year and a half from now that we might have an impact.
So do you have all of this on a spreadsheet somewhere? Is it just in that fabulous brain of yours?
It is all tracked in multiple places, but yeah, it's kind of it rolls into this particular spreadsheet. There's another one that I present to the board. I did at the finance committee that looks at the more of a 3-year future, and it rolls in many of these annual assumptions that are made, and that whole $40 million estimate maybe is too high, and so that might need to come down when we start looking more 2, 3, 4 years out, and that's where a lot of that story resides.
Well, unless something changes from with the FML dollars and the severance tax, we need to really be constantly reminded that this is a different world than the one that we have had up till today. And so our thinking about how we operate has to have that adjustment in it. And I think we need to see that. We hear it, you've got it. I'm satisfied with that. But I think all I'm asking is every time we talk with you, you need to show us that again. And there's lots of variables, so we know it's all over the board. But it is a significant change in the way we are able to do business. And I think we need to start having a line that tells us that.
Further questions for Kirk? Have we got enough guidance for good shape? All right.
I've got clear guidance on that.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Director Jones.
Director Mitchell.
I just wanted to introduce one more person that the board might not know. Liz Schmidt, could you wave? Liz works at our front desk. She's far overqualified, but you probably filter through her to get to anyone in the agency. And so just know we see her moving up. And so I wanted to put a face to a name. And even though you can't always see her in the back row, she's here and she's taking care of us. So thank you, Liz.
All right, that concludes agenda item number 18. We will move to agenda item 19. Good morning, Jonathan.
Morning. Jonathan Hernandez, CWCB staff. For the record, presenting agenda item 19A. This is a loan request for the Windy Gap firming project. Has that always been crooked, or did I adjust that screen somehow? Okay, sorry. I wasn't here yesterday, wasn't paying attention. This is a loan request to the Municipal Subdistrict of Northern Colorado Water Conservancy District, acting by and through a water activity enterprise, and it is a $90 million loan request. And as you had heard, this was included in last year's projects bill. Eric Wilkinson is the general manager for Northern Water. Sadly, one of the few last times that we'll be able to say he's a general manager of Northern Water. But he is with us in the audience, as well as John Buddy, and he is the financial manager for Northern. Being a bigger project, a bigger loan request, I wanted to take time to have more of a thorough presentation. I know I've heard Windy Gap firming many times. I've heard Windy Gap, CBT. It's easy to kind of get some of these projects confused. Again, who are these players? Who are the legal entities? So I wanted to take some time to go relatively quickly through the history, who Northern Water is, the municipal subdistricts, what this project is, why is it needed. Then we'll talk about the project itself. Spoiler alert, it's Chimney Hollow Reservoir is the selected alternative. So we'll talk about that project, what the construction will look like, the mitigation and enhancements that are being covered. And then we'll talk about the financial plan. Again, who the borrower is exactly that we're lending it to. Talk about these water storage contracts that will play a key part in our contract with the municipal subdistrict. Loans and bonds, how these are going to be working together. The total project is $440 million estimated. So we only have a little bit of that. So what's that interplay going to look like? Look at the financials, and then want to make sure that the board is aware that a lawsuit has been filed. So I'll talk fairly briefly about that. It's a relatively new lawsuit, so there's not a whole lot, but I'd want to make sure the board is aware. So Northern Water, full name Northern Colorado Water Conservancy District. They are located in Northern Colorado, and you can see their service area here. So it's largely east slope, diverting from the west slope, delivering to the east slope. Created in 1937, and Northern Water is kind of the same as in our minds, the CBT project, the Colorado Big Thompson project. Reclamation owns that project, and together Reclamation and Northern Water operate the CBT project for this transbasin diversion. I've highlighted a few of the reservoirs here. The CBT system is very vast. Kind of the key elements are on the west slope, Lake Granby, Shadow Mountain Reservoir, Grand Lake, then goes into the Alva B. Adams Tunnel, where it's delivered near Estes Park, and then splits out from there. I highlighted also Carter Lake, Pinewood Reservoir, and Flatiron Reservoir, located just west of Loveland here. And this is the future location for Chimney Hollow, right on the other side of Carter Lake. So I just wanted to highlight those areas, as this does interplay with the CBT system quite a bit. The municipal subdistrict is a separate legal distinct district from Northern, but Northern is their parent district. So they do share the same board of directors. They do have different officers though. So in 1970, the municipal subdistrict was created. These entities on the right here are the current participants. I think when it was created, it was 6 or 8 participants at the time, but they had Windy Gap water, and they were looking for a way to get those water rights to their municipalities. And in the blue, here's where the Windy Gap Reservoir is now. At the time, there was no reservoir when they started talking. So they were created within Northern Water to really use Northern Waters or Reclamation's CBT project. But again, they are separate and independent from Northern, and this loan request is to the municipal subdistrict as opposed to the parent district, Northern Water. The key element of the municipal subdistrict has always been the Windy Gap project. And so it was through them and their Windy Gap Water Activity Enterprise that they built Windy Gap Reservoir, and they have a pipeline and pump station up to Lake Granby. And I bet most of us have at some point toured this area, but for, again, just kind of get our bearings, Lake Granby, it's on the west slope. Windy Gap Reservoir, much smaller in size in comparison. And so this is the Windy Gap project as it exists today. The diversions began in 1985, and they deliver this water through a carriage contract with Northern. And so a key element in the carriage contract with Northern is that this water can be delivered, and Northern Reclamation agrees to deliver it through their system as long as there's unused capacity in CBT. So there are reservoirs, it's CBT's reservoir, CBT's tunnel, they get first dibs, more or less, to use those facilities. But when there's room, the Windy Gap water can be diverted through. So that leads us to the question at hand is, okay, they have the reservoirs, they have the diversions, what's the need, what's the project at hand? And I have, being an engineer, I love equations, and I really love simple equations. So, zero water in dry years. Windy Gap water is very junior. So in dry years, there's not enough water in the river to divert the water. The participants cannot divert water. But then you contrast that with a wet year, and the CBT system is full. Lake Granby is full. There's nowhere they can't get the water through the CBT system in wet years because it's too full. And so that equation equals at the end of the day, there's zero firm yield. Now, every year they have been able to make deliveries. There's agreements between the Windy Gap participants and CBT of how they can still work around and make some agreements. But at the end of the day, there is zero firm yield, and that's what they're trying to solve with the firming project. So firming project to get firm yield. So it's largely the same participants as the Windy Gap project. Take away Estes and Boulder. They are not part of the Windy Gap firming project. But this map shows and lists the 12 different entities that really make up the Windy Gap firming project. And so in 1999, they really got together and began planning how do we firm up the yield from this. And the participant-driven goal was 30,000 acre feet. That's what, when the municipal subdistrict asked all their participants, what do you need? What are you looking for this? They said 30,000 acre feet. And so that brings us a lot of discussion from then to now to say Chimney Hollow is the preferred alternative and the selected alternative through the permitting process. I will point out, I'm not sure if it says this later on in my slide, so I apologize if I'll repeat this. The original EIS for Windy Gap project, when they were building the reservoir, they knew they that the entities needed terminal storage. And so it was mentioned that this is the Windy Gap Reservoir is the first step. There will be terminal storage needed. And at that time, it was looking at multiple, basically each entity or each participant will build their own reservoir, find that storage somewhere. So through all that process, it changed to one regional cooperative project that all the participants can use. So that's Chimney Hollow. They've identified this site. It can provide 90,000 acre feet of storage, and that will provide about the 30,000 acre feet of the firm yield that the participants are looking for. That will similarly use the CBT infrastructure in the same manner that the Windy Gap water is used now. It's using existing water rights for the diversions. And again, it's a selected alternative. They had looked at about 170 through the different permitting processes over the years. Typically, for the past 15, 20 years, you couldn't get through a Windy Gap firming presentation without talking about permitting and where are we now? And it was, well, we're 10 years in and $10 million in, we're still nowhere, and we're 11, we're 12, 13. So we can now say it was a 14-year permitting process. They've federal permitting, the Corps issued the 404 permit earlier this year. It is currently a 10, but it was a 14-year permitting process. In 2016 permit, that was all through the water plan, the governor to be able to do that. So again, want to make sure, so when I say Carter Lake and all these things, I immediately know where they are, but for reference, we are sitting in a boardroom where the Star is, Loveland, and just west of them is Carter Lake. And again, the future Chimney Hollow site will just be on the other side of the hogback from Carter Lake. So the foothills of northern Colorado's Front Range. Zooming in a little bit closer, the land ownership already, so that was a huge hurdle that they had. And it's adjacent to Larimer County's open space. And so part of this reservoir, when it's complete, it'll be managed part of Larimer County's open space for the recreational trail use and whatnot. So the components of the Chimney Hollow Reservoir construction. First, it's the 350-foot tall asphalt concrete rockfill dam. Also, sometimes you hear it called hydraulic asphalt core dam. Is instead of using a clay as your barrier inside the dam, they're actually using hydraulic asphalt. Couple of things of note for this dam is it will be the tallest dam built in the United States over the, I just said the United States, I'm not sure if it's Colorado or United States, but one of those two. It'll be the tallest in 50 years. I do know there is no other asphalt concrete rockfill dam that exists in the United States right now. Arizona is going to beat this project to be the first one. They start construction in January or February. But internationally, there are 120 that do exist. It is a proven technology. It was came out of Europe, and it was selected here largely because of lack of clay at the site. And so when the engineers were doing their analysis for dam design, this one rose to the top as it actually will be cheaper than clay. Clay, if available, usually is the most cost effective, but not for this site. So we have a 350-foot tall dam in the north, but we can't forget about this little guy, this little 36. He will also be an asphalt core dam, so he'll also be special even if he's forgotten in kind of the bigger 350-foot. And for reference, I'd recently heard 350 foot is 100 feet taller than Horsetooth's dams. So, yeah. Part of the project will be an inlet from CBT's Flatiron penstocks. So again, this is the existing penstock. And if you're in this area in the foothills, you can see the two pipelines coming down from Estes, and it's delivering water into Flatiron. there's a reclamation makes power off of this water. And so there will be a tying off of this existing penstock to bring the water through the CBT system. There, of course, will be the spillway inlet outlet. And then I wanted to talk real quick about pre-positioning of water, how the water management will work in a very high level explanation, because I'm not sure I can give you a very detailed one. But it's agreed to, and they're going to water court to kind of get it confirmed that they will be able to deliver CBT water into the reservoir and then be able to, when they pump Windy Gap water into Lake Granby, at that instant, the CBT water starts turning into Windy Gap water. And so it's being able to pre-position in this way eliminates the need for another western slope reservoir. So if you've heard of Jasper, that was one of the reservoirs they're looking at, kind of on the west slope. So pre-positioning of the water in that way allows them to avoid that. So again, in a very general sense, they are able to deliver CBT water into Chimney Hollow and then exchange it once the Windy Gap hits Lake Granby. That also solves the problem with what happens if Lake Granby is full and we can't deliver through the lake. It's where they start delivering and they start pumping at the same time, and they're able to get through that problem that way. Here's a rendering that I did not put together. So this comes from Northern and their staff. If this was a little zoomed out, you would see Carter Lake just over on this side, and Flatiron Reservoir is just downstream from the spillway here. But essentially putting the dam in this valley. There's a few rivers that come through here, but it's actually, or rivers, more of a creek. But it's actually a pretty small, hydraulic area. So I know like their spillway is sized way smaller than you would think when you see such a large dam out there, but it's because they just don't have that much of a drainage area, which also suits this site pretty well for them. There will be a power line relocation. There's a power line through here, so that'll get relocated. The public access road that will be built after this project is done as part of Larimer County's open space and their trail system that they're going to develop out here. And enhancements, the mitigation is what was required by the federal permitting process. And so those are included in these costs. And the enhancements are the voluntary agreements that they had through decades of discussions with the West Slope and different entities. And so it's under those voluntary enhancements that things such as the Windy Gap connectivity channel, which you know well about, where that came from. And so those costs are included in that overall $440 million budget. And the thing that the municipal subdistricts and all the participants are really proud of is that when they started conversations, they had many opponents to this project. And Trout Unlimited and Upper Colorado River Alliance are two of the bigger ones that were vocal about it and were at the table in negotiations. And now through the enhancements that they're done, they're actually project supporters because in their mind, this project will enhance the Colorado River. And so that's something that they can be proud of, is that through years of discussions, they were able to come together and turn some opponents into supporters. So now switching more, looking at it financially, looking at it legally, how is this set up? They don't usually do this part of the presentation during the public. I think the public just wants to know what's being built and how. So again, we have the municipal subdistrict, and the subdistrict has split into two water activity enterprises. The Windy Gap, again, they have the water. Windy Gap Reservoir, they do the diversions. Windy Gap Firming Enterprise will have the storage. Not all participants are part of both, and so they had them split up in order to track cost. Participants through the Windy Gap Water Enterprise have water allotment contracts. That's how they reimburse the municipal subdistrict. And again, the the Windy Gap Water Enterprise, they are the ones that are doing the operation of Windy Gap Reservoir, paying the delivery and the main diversion charges. So Windy Gap Firming Enterprise, with the participants that are also part of that, they will have storage allotment contracts. The storage allotment contracts, I'll talk to on the later slide, but it's how they get their storage and how they pay for it. It's the firming enterprise that will run the operations of Chimney Hollow, and they will run that operation separate. So accounting wise, the delivery of Windy Gap and then the storage of Windy Gap will be accounted separately, again, because they have different participants in each. And then again, the contractor for this project will be through the firming enterprise side of the municipal subdistrict. So for our loan, our borrower is the municipal subdistrict acting by and through the firming enterprise. And our collateral is tied to the firming enterprise revenues. And the only revenues they have is through the storage allotment contracts with the participants. So that's why you will see the collateral we are seeking is the revenue from the storage allotment contracts. So listed for your review, if you want to get into the deep numbers here, is the participants as they are now and their storage volume that they will be purchasing and owning through the Chimney Hollow project. And it's the storage contracts that gives them that ability to store their water, the Windy Gap water, and it will obligate them to pay the operation and maintenance of the reservoir, the power interference charges. If you recall the pen stock I showed, reclamation makes electricity off of that water, and this project will be diverting some of the water before reclamation has a chance to make electricity off of it. And so that cost difference, the enterprise will have to pay back to reclamation to offset that. And then the storage contracts will also have the bond and loan debt service payments is a required aspect to it. Some of the credit enhancers within the storage allotment contracts is that they will be including a take or pay provision. So any given year, say Broomfield, because they own the most here, they own 29.4% of the storage. So in any given year, if they choose not to have any water delivered or stored, they are still paying 29.4%. So whether they take the water and they pay for it, or they don't take it, they still pay for the operations. There will also be step-up provisions that will be integrated into the storage allotment contracts. Essentially, there will be voluntary and involuntary. So if one of these entities somewhere down the line pulls out of the project, another entity can voluntarily take over that ownership and start paying that for that acre foot. And then if no one does, there will be a way to involuntarily make them all pay kind of a little bit more. And so in any given year, 100% will be funded of the cost. And then the debt service for the participants, when they sign these storage allotment contracts, it will be required that they are able to put that on parity with their other first lien debts. And so that will be important to us as I talk about the position that we are asking the board to allow this loan to be actually subordinate to the revenue bonds to build the project. But I'll get to that in a minute. A quick schedule. I kind of laugh at this schedule that I put together because it hides so much work that's going on. These little blue squares for each quarter just hides a lot of work. But again, the permits were finalized earlier this year, and so now they're moving, they're going. Storage allotment contracts by the first quarter of 2018. They're working on a revised cost estimate currently, and they want to get those numbers massaged and make sure that they understand the full number. And the storage allotment contract will initially be based on this new estimate that will be coming out. Also, the first quarter, they're going to be working with contractor pre-qualifications before they put this out to bid. Bidding and award will go through summer and fall. Once they receive the bid, they can then sell the revenue bonds. So they're securing our $90 million loan, or seeking to secure that now, to be able to show when they sell the bonds that they have some other financial backing. But they're waiting until the project is bid, so they have a hard contractor's bid in order to know how much to sell the actual final bonds for. So in the final project cost, it's the bond that will shrink with the actual construction cost. Our loan will stay at the 90 million. And if all goes well, construction, that the first blue dot probably shouldn't be there. It's more the last quarter of 2018, maybe beginning of 2019. There was a lot of work to get done in a year, but that is the goal, is to start construction at the end of 2018. Now, before I get into the the finances and finish this presentation, again, I wanted to bring to your attention to make sure that you were aware there is a pending lawsuit or filed lawsuit. So it was filed by Save the Colorado, Save the Pooter, Wild Earth Guardians, Living Rivers, and Water Alliance. And the lawsuit is filed against Reclamation and Army Corps. And I put a summarize next to the claims, because again, just very high level. From reading the news articles that I could, it sounds like their overall claim is the permitting process was flawed and didn't take into account all alternatives. And so they were making the claim that, you know, conservation should be the only alternative, rather than this project actually incorporates conservation in knowing how big of the reservoir to make when they're making their projections. And so that's their issues, was that conservation wasn't its own separate alternative. And so the project impacts for this, it's largely unknown at the time. It's a new lawsuit recently filed. Looking down the road, when they go to sell bonds, if the lawsuit is still pending, you could see, or they could see, an increased percentage rates for the bonds, is if the bond market decides this is adding risk to the project. If a judge decides that he wants to delay the project until the lawsuit's done, then we could see higher construction costs because of delayed construction. So that's out there. And again, just want to make sure that we didn't give the impression that we're trying to hide anything from the board as we make this presentation. So the finances of this, the municipal subdistrict is offering a pooled financing for their participants, rather than telling each of the participants to, hey, find your own way and have 12 different financial packages out there that now the municipal subdistrict is trying to manage and pay their bills with. They wanted to pool it all together and offer one package that the participants can sign up for. And so it will include revenue bonds. That'll be the larger part of this. And those will be senior to this loan request if approved as is. And so this $90 million loan, staff is recommending that the board approve it to be subordinate to these bonds. And some of the reasons for that is to help the participants to get an even better interest rate on the bond market. So if the bond knows, okay, this is a $400 million cost going out in the future, 90 is taken care of, and we're not competing on that for parity, then essentially that $90 million can be seen by them as cash in the project. So it helps with their ratios. Again, with us being in a subordinate position, we are asking, and they were gladly offering the take or pay provisions, step up provisions, and in the water storage contracts. And again, the water storage contract to the participant will be on parity, but inside the water storage contract, we will be subordinate to the bond. The current project cost is $440 million, includes mitigation and enhancements. Of that $440 million, approximately $40 million has already been spent. So that's not cost going forward, but currently overall cost. So overall, they're looking at this as just being under $5,000 an acre foot for this reservoir. Again, the bonds will be sold after bids received. And so the financial analysis that's in the board memo has some assumptions on what that bond might look like, what the percentage rate might look like, but the loan will remain 90 million, and it will be the bond that will fluctuate with the actual project cost. The participants do have the option of joining the pooled financing or self-financing it on their own. I know the board of the municipal subdistrict in Northern, they have made it clear to the participants that they wish for everyone to join together. I don't think they've yet made that a mandate, and that'll be worked out as they finalize the water or the storage agreements. So if it's with the loan, with the bond, and perhaps cash, all that funding will be secured by the time they issue the notice to proceed, hopefully roughly in about a year from now. Looking specifically just at our at the 90 million loan request, that is at an interest rate of 3.1% for 30 years. Because they were asking for a subordinate position, another thing we didn't feel right was giving the automatic municipal rates that we offer. And so we offered and negotiated, what if we made it more of a market rate? And so we looked at a AA rated bond market rate at the time that they applied, and that's 3.1%. And so that's how we got to that number. If you look at our website now, the high municipal is 3%. So it's right about there. Annual loan payment, about $4.6 million. That's a weird number to see as the annual loan payment. Annual loan obligation, including the 10% reserve, will be 5.1. Again, with all of our loans, we require that in the first 10 years, they have a payment set aside. If they set aside that with cash right up front, then they don't need to do the 10% each year. The financial ratios, the future with the project, we're trying to look at post-construction cost to kind of see, okay, once this is done, what's their financials going to look like? And so those are the rate or the percentages you see in that table. And really the only expenses of the firming enterprise is the O&M, the power interference that I spoke about, and then the debt service. And the O&M is specific to Chimney Hollow. It's not the whole Windy Gap O&M. The past 3 years of the financial ratios, they've been in design and permitting mode. And so there's not a real direct correlation from past with project to future with project. The collateral that is offered is a pledge of revenues from the storage allotment contracts. That really is the source of revenue for the firming enterprise. And again, the revenue bonds will also be tied to that collateral, and they will be senior if staff recommendation is approved. And so with that, you have the staff recommendation in front of you. I will point out there are 2 loan approval conditions, which talk about the provisions we want to see in the storage allotment contracts as I've gone through. But I would be more than happy to take any questions, or I know Eric would as well.
All right, questions for Jonathan at this time? Director Gold.
Thanks, Jonathan. That was very helpful. I was just curious, there's 30,000 acre foot of firm storage. What's the expected average or yield? I mean, what's the expected average yield?
Going forward, that will be the expected average because in the past years, they've been around 18, 20. It fluctuates every year, but they haven't been able to get to that. I think actually they have a few years gotten above the 30, but that will be the average, or that will be the floor. And I do know that they are anticipating about 10,000 acre feet. This project will allow about 10,000 acre feet more to be diverted out of the Colorado River Basin, which again highlights the need for the enhancements that they're doing.
Any other questions? Director Gallagher.
2 questions, Jonathan. Have we ever structured a loan this way of this magnitude?
We got this idea from the Aurora Prairie Waters project, and that was a $70 million loan that was recently paid back. And we were actually in a subordinate position on that one.
Were we in a 25% exposure there? Yeah. Okay. And this subordination to their revenue bond is Meaning that the bonds get paid off first.
Correct.
Yeah.
So the storage
And the
allotment
revenues from the collateral basically goes to the bonds first. We're second on the list.
correct.
Yeah.
And any shortfall.
Right. And then that does not go against any policies or state policies for loans that we know about.
I know it's more unique than common.
But it does not go against any policies that we've, or state policies about loaning state money.
Don't believe so. Kirk, do you know if, with the issues with Aurora, I'm not sure what was negotiated on that one.
Yeah, Kirk Russell, Finance Section Chief. As Jonathan indicated, this will be a variation from the board's policy, but there is no state requirement on this. It will go through a contractual review by the state controller for risk. And so because it is a variation from the board's policy, it does go in a little bit different route to get approved by the state controller. But
Do we need a variance on our policy in order to approve this?
And move this back down. I think typically when it's a variance of just the board's policy, that doesn't have to be laid out as the staff in the staff recommendation area. But I think it is highlighted. Let me bring it here in the collateral section. And so it does state that the security is a variance from CWCB Financial Policy 5.
Our action other than the
Don't
approving
believe
the
so.
recommendation.
Not typically required in the motion.
Further questions of Jonathan at this time? I don't believe so. Eric and John, would you like to speak? And good morning.
Morning. For the record, Eric Wilkinson, General Manager, Northern Water and the Municipal Subdistrict. It's a great pleasure to be here today. And we very much appreciate the board's consideration of this. I don't think it can be overstated the importance of this particular loan to moving forward with this project. The advantage of this loan to the project in regard to going out on the bond market and getting senior bonds is very, very advantageous. It's looked at as, obviously, as was pointed out by Jonathan, and incidentally, Jonathan, you did an excellent job of presenting the project. The individual holders of the senior bonds look at this as a subordinate loan, knowing that they'll be paid before you will be paid. I can assure you that's not the intent of the municipal subdistrict water activity enterprise. You are on an equal standing. There's no question with that. And I won't be around to see it, but I can guarantee you, at least from my perspective and the culture of the district, we won't be delinquent on this loan in any way. But when you look at the ratios of what we're proposing here, we're having participants bring about $84 million to the table. 40 million, as Jonathan points out, has already been there in cash. Your $90 million subordinate loan, and then about $266,000 of senior loans means that you've got a coverage of roughly a fourth of, or a third of the coverage is of the senior loan is that subordinate loan. In other words, 3/4 of what we're borrowing is the senior loan. 1/4 would be yours. So when a senior holder looks at that, they see that they have roughly 1.3 times the coverage of their senior loan under our allotment contracts, because our allotment contracts are going to obviously ask for debt coverage, step up, and probably a reserve fund as well. So with those being present, your subordinate loan being by far and away the largest factor to influence beneficially the attitude of senior bondholders toward this project. We're in a lot better condition in regard to getting favorable loan rates. It will make a number of basis points, I'm sure, difference on our loan that we get on the senior loans. So, and we're working very hard with our municipal advisor and our underwriters to try to get as good a position as we possibly can for those senior loans. I'd be happy to ask any other. I would just like to clarify, if the board would give me permission, the average yield of the project is going to be around 48,000 acre feet. That doesn't change much. On the average, we'll get 8 or 10,000 acre feet more because right now we can't divert when the CBT project is full. And as an example, between 1995 and 2000 inclusively, and in the last 4 years, we couldn't divert Windy Gap because the CBT project was full. With our pre-positioning that Jonathan explained, we will be able to divert, even though the CBT project is considered full by the pre-positioning of water in Chimney Hollow, freeing up space in Granby Reservoir. So it does enhance the operation of the project. What we're really going for with this project, obviously, is the 30,000 acre feet of firm yield to firm up that water supply. So year in, year out, the 12 participants in this project do have that firm yield of 30,000 acre feet collectively. I'd be happy to answer any other questions.
Other questions for Eric or John? Would you stick around for, Director Young?
Oh, no, I just wanted to thank you for, I just have one question. When is your retirement official?
Whenever they find my replacement.
Okay. And I just wanted to congratulate you on an incredible career here and your incredible influence on this project and other projects throughout the state, and your work on this board as well. So I just want to say thanks for all your work.
Very kind. It's been a lot of fun. Been a lot of fun.
Stick around for just a second. I think Director Mitchell has some.
We can wait until if anyone wants to make a motion.
Somebody might want to make a motion. All right. So thanks, Jonathan. That was very well done. So thanks for your work on that. And it is a big loan. So after you work on this one, all the other ones like, what am I doing here? No, they're all important though. But this is one of our identified projects and processes on our South Platte Basin, and it will make a significant impact to the water gap. So I just wanted to make sure I said that and it's on the record. Anyway, and also I think it's fitting that we're meeting in Broomfield here today because Broomfield is one of the participants, and it's actually the largest participant. I think I saw it 29.4%. So that's fitting that we're here today. And while this is being built as a project for municipal, firming of municipal yield of water, I also look at it as the preservation of agriculture. Because if we don't have projects like this, you know, it makes it much more difficult for, or it makes it less likely that these municipalities, 12 of them or 13 of them, will come out into the agriculture sector and buy up and dry up agriculture. So this is, in my mind, kind of an exciting and historic day. So I'm glad that you came to us. And with that, it is my pleasure and my honor to move staff recommendation on agenda item 19A for $90 million to Windy Gap Firming Project Water Activity Enterprise.
It has been moved by Director Yon to approve agenda item 19A, second by Director Dutton. Call for the vote. All those in favor signify by an aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. I believe Director Mitchell has some words.
Now that the loan is approved, I get to say a few nice things about you, Eric. I didn't feel it was appropriate before that. I didn't want to sway the vote, but I wanted to talk in reflection on Windy Gap and my relationship with Eric through that process. And I think as we looked at the 14-year permitting process, that may seem long to a lot of us, and it is too long for permitting in the state of Colorado, but it is relatively quick as you look at the other projects. And I think much of that is attributed to the municipal subdistrict and the staff at Northern. And I think it would be remiss if I didn't say that that comes from the leadership. And I am so proud to have known you. And I'm proud to call you my friend. And I think getting the first state endorsement is something to be extremely proud of, and there's reasons for that, and a lot of that is attributed to you and the staff there at Northern. And so a little bit of a background story. That 14-year permitting process may have been a bit shorter, but there was a time that the DNR director called Eric in when we were looking at the Fish and Wildlife Mitigation Plan and said, could you pause? And let's look at cumulative effects with the Gross Reservoir expansion. Are you willing to do that? And they didn't have to. And Eric made that agreement to do that. And I am so proud of that decision. And it took more work, but it was the right thing to do. And I think that's an example of how Northern works all the time. So thank you. Thank you very much. And I appreciate our time together. Thank you, Eric.
Well, Eric, I think that you will not be retiring soon if the condition is finding a replacement for you. And by the way, as a lawyer, I want to say that we appreciate the fact that you're letting the students at the DU Law School learn about environmental law.
That was a little. A comment I'd like to make is, as we were developing the water plan and then working with the folks at Northern on the financing of it, one of the ideas we have and is allowed for in the water plan financing is a loan guarantee by the state. And that was one of the considerations. And really, it would accomplish some of the same things, but the fact that we're a 25% approximately position in that, we're actually going to get interest, where if we'd been a loan guarantee, we wouldn't have had a revenue stream coming back in. And so I think that's a credit to the water plan and the creative financing and the collaborative, cooperative spirit of the Northern people of making something like this work.
Go ahead, Eric, please.
I just want to say thank you. I wear my emotions on my sleeve, so I'm not going to say much, but thank you.
More than welcome. Any other directors? Well, with closing with this, this is a woohoo day for the state of Colorado, Northern in particular, and also for the CWCB. I mean, this is a big deal. And I'll be right honest with you, I would like just to have a round of applause for all the hard work that everybody has done to put this into motion. So thank you. All right, with that, let's move to agenda item number 20.
All right, Jonathan Hernandez, CWCB staff for the record, presenting agenda item 20A. This is a loan increase request to the North Poudre Irrigation Company. You see the project site for this project is just north of Fort Collins. This is the Mountain Supply Reservoir number 10 repairs project. This came before the board earlier this year in spring, and they're seeking a total loan amount of $795,000, an increase of $300,000. The loan terms will remain 30 years at 2.5%. Tad Moen is the general manager. and he is with us in the audience if you have any questions for him at the end of the presentation. To give you a background again, the North Peter Irrigation Company, they're located, you can see their service area here, largely north of Fort Collins, Wellington. Mutual Ditch Company, established in 1901, nonprofit. They serve approximately 28,000 acres, 22 reservoirs, 200 ditch miles, 598 shareholders, 14 communities and water providers all use this system. So they are a very large ditch company in this area. We have been very involved with this ditch company over the years. These dots here show the different reservoirs, and the ones that I've highlighted are reservoirs that we currently have loans out on. So they've been very active in our loan program, and we've appreciated them because they've paid their bills on time and very regularly. So they've been a good borrower. Reservoir 10 is the reservoir in question, and again, you can see it here just north of Fort Collins. This project, the whole purpose of the project is to lift a SCO storage restriction. It was at 0. They made some temporary repairs. They now have a temporary allowance to store 80 acre feet. They want to make the necessary repairs and also do some silt removal to regain the full 344 that this reservoir is decreed for. So they have inlet works, including new inlet works, lining the inlet conduit and installing the new energy dissipation structure. And then for the outlet, similar activities. And then within the reservoir itself, removing the silt and installing a new spillway control wall. So the project hasn't really changed from when you saw this earlier in the year. For an update, they've completed final design. So when it came to the original loan, it was still that 30-50% design level. They've now completed final design. They've received SEO approval on their plans for construction. They have bid the project. They received 2 competitive bids. They were very close in nature, which you always like to see when contractors are kind of thinking along the same line. They've selected Zach Dirt to be their contractor, and their notice to proceed is pending this action today, just so they know that, of course, there's contracting delays, but they know that they can start and that they will have the full loan in place. Again, they're seeking the difference to cover the $300,000 difference. They've included some items that weren't originally included with the final design. It's kind of increased some of the existing items that they were looking at. So by and large, 637 was the bid for construction, still adding a little bit of contingency, and that's how they arrive at their request for $795,000 loan. That loan with the service fee is $802,950. It's again the same blended interest rate that they had originally approved at 2.5%, and this is an annual loan obligation of $42,199. Ratios indicate that they're an average borrower, and they don't plan that they need to make a further assessment increase. Over the past 5 years or so, they've ramped up assessments quite a bit, and they're at a level now where they can handle this debt. So I do point out in the financial ratios, they do have a high future debt service. With this loan, they'll be at $640,000 per year of payments to CWCB. But I also point out that they do have a good supply of revenues. This is a large ditch company, a lot of municipal owners on the ditch, and so they do have about 3.1 million coming in revenues. Collateral is assessment revenues with the rate covenant, and 100% undivided interest in reservoir number 10. That's the same collateral as approved, so no change there. So with that, I will ask the board if you have any questions of me or of Tad.
Questions of Jonathan at this time? I don't believe so. Chad, would you like to speak?
I'm a lot smaller than all these other guys. I'd just like to say thank you for your time.
Would you just identify yourself if you would, please?
I'm sorry? Chad Moen.
Thanks. Thank you.
I'd just like to say thank you for helping North Pooter, Reservoir 4, and then with Reservoir 10. Appreciate all the work and meeting everybody. So
Great. Thank you. Questions of Chad? Thanks again for being here today. Director Yon.
Thank you. I would just like to move staff recommendation on item 20A.
We have a motion by Director Yon to move staff recommendation, second by Director Hawkins. Further discussion? Call for the vote. All those in favor signify by an aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. At this time, we are scheduled for a break. Let's be back in our seats at 11:35. Item number 21. How are you, Ben?
Doing well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Ben Wade, CWCB staff, presenting agenda item number 21. This is a water efficiency grant application from the Metro State University of Denver One World, One Water Center. This is phase 2, the Colorado Water Collaboratory. Just quickly, brief background is phase 1 was funded with another water efficiency grant last year. The ultimate goal of this project is to create living laboratories on university campuses just to be more water efficient with indoor and outdoor use, as well as testing new technologies and creating behavioral change. For this particular project, phase 2, this is going to be a 2-year project. This is going to cover 2 campuses, Metro State and also at CU Boulder. They will be forming stakeholder groups that will set goals for each individual campus as they understand impacts on water quantity and quality on both campuses. They're going to identify strategies and actions for now and in the future. And as they develop these water action plans, they'll work to implement these plans. There'll be a lot of student involvement, whether it's through coursework and or volunteer positions. The tool that they're going to be using is to analyze this data and impacts is going to be the Net Zero Toolkit. That was another project funded about 2 years ago through another water efficiency grant. One World, One Water Center, they'll be sharing these strategies and materials when the work is done. So they'll share it throughout Colorado for other universities and other college campuses, as well as other industries that are interested. This particular project helps to further one of the conservation goals to increase municipal efficiency, as well as create more of a water conservation ethic within the state. The total project cost is $113,696. One World, One Water Center is going to commit $30,000 of in-kind match, and that results in a 27% matching fund, so they do meet that match requirement. Staff recommendation is to approve a water efficiency grant not to exceed $83,696 to the One World, One Water Center at Metro State University of Denver to fund phase 2 of this project. With me today in the audience is Tom Check, who is director of the One World, One Water Center, as well as Russ Sands, who is a consultant from the Brendel Group. We'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Questions of Ben? I don't believe so. Tom, would you like to speak?
Very much. My name is Tom Check. I'm the co-director of the One World, One Water Center at Metropolitan State University of Denver. Thank you very much for considering this grant application. Our goal is to work with universities across the state to become more water efficient and to also inform and educate the professors and faculty and staff at these universities. And we all know that by far a large majority of people along the Front Range have moved here from somewhere else, probably from back east, places like Nebraska, New Jersey. And there's a dire need for information and behavioral change. We're not pouring concrete or storing or diverting water, but innovation and education and outreach are really important projects and goals for all of our work. Thank you.
Questions for Tom or Russ? I don't believe so. Thank you. Director Yon.
Thank you. Thanks, Tom, for bringing this forward, and thanks for all your work at the One World, One Water. You're doing a lot of work. Even though you're from Nebraska, I think you're doing a great job. But with that, I'd like to move staff recommendation on item 21.
By Director Yon, second by Director Gallagher, to move staff recommendation, agenda item number 21. Further discussion? Call for the vote. All those in favor signify by an aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Before we move to agenda item number 22, if we could let the record reflect that Director George has an excused absence from this point forward. And let's move to agenda item number 22.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Kevin Hauk, CWCB staff. I'm here to open agenda item 22, which is an update on the River Run project along the South Platte River through the Denver metro area. And I would just like to provide a little context of the project before I turn it over to my guest speaker, which is Laura Krager from the Urban Drainage and Flood Control District, who's going to be presenting most of this item. So many of you are familiar with Chatfield Reservoir, and that was built, 45, 50 years ago, primarily for the purpose of flood control through the Denver metro area. And one of the conditions of building that reservoir was to also do a secondary project along the downstream channel to accept flood flows that could be coming out of that reservoir. And when the Corps of Engineers built that project, they required there to be a non-federal sponsor that would be tasked with ongoing operations and maintenance activities along that reach. And the CWCB is that non-federal sponsor. So we are the proud owners of an easement from the outlet of the reservoir down to the confluence with Bear Creek. And this project falls in this reach. And I'd just like to say that we've been trying to get away from just the standard flood control objectives through this particular reach in recent years. Flood control is still something that's important, maintain the flood capacity, but we're also trying to branch out into more multi-objective type arrangements. And these will help us meet some of the non-consumptive use goals that we have in Colorado's water plan. And I think you'll see some of these during the presentation today. So I'd just like to recognize a couple of our partners through this process. One is the South Platte Working Group, which is a stakeholder group made up of representatives from all the local governments through which the South Platte River flows along this reach, as well as other interested stakeholders in that group. They've been very helpful in helping us fundraise for some of these multi-objective projects. They've also done other great things, like they purchased 50 acre-feet in the environmental pool of Chatfield, and they've been helping us move a lot of our projects forward. The other really great partner that we've had in this project is the Urban Drainage and Flood Control District. And they're about a 50-year-old agency whose mission has been to basically help reduce the risk of flooding and other related risks throughout the Denver metro area. And they've really latched on to some of these projects throughout this entire reach that we've been working on, including the one you're hearing today. And at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Laura Krager of the Urban Drainage and Flood Control District, who's been a leader in this River Run project.
Questions for Kevin? I don't believe so. Please join us, Laura.
For the record, Laura Krager with Urban Drainage and Flood Control District. It is always great to come talk about a project. If you saw, it was up there for a little bit. We are on the front page of the paper yesterday with River Run. So that's awesome. The other great thing, which I love talking to you about today, is that I'm not asking for money. And oftentimes when I've been talking about this project, it was in anticipation of raising the dollars that we needed to put this in the ground. So today we're really just going to tell you the story of River Run, and it's very much a part of that story with the support that we got from Kevin and Joe Busto, as well as Chris Sturm. So let me begin with our story. It's always good to have a little bit of background. As Kevin said, I'm with the Urban Drainage and Flood Control District, and we are a quasi-governmental agency. Our mission and vision is to protect people, property, and the environment, and we do that through preservation, mitigation, and education for our streams. We roughly service about 2.8 million people, 3,500 miles of streams are within the district property. So a little bit of background to give you the start of the story. So our setting takes place in the city of Sheridan, where we did our project called River Run. And as Kevin mentioned, it is part of the downstream Chatfield improvement projects, which you were a sponsor of. And that's going to come in play a little bit later as we talk about every story needs a conflict, right? So that's going to be the start of that. A really important piece to also know about this reach is that it's part of the Mary Carter Greenway Trail, runs along the South Platte River. There's 1 million users that use that per year. And so that had a lot of impact of what we were looking to do in this project, as well as there were some failing drop structures that were put in with that original project. So that was on my radar when I asked what projects needed to get done about 5 years ago. And that came up of that we really need to fix those drops. So that's where our characters come in. because Joe is our man on the river. And he said, yeah, Laura, those really need to be replaced. And so I said, great, I'll get my team together. And so I did our normal process and I picked a consultant. And then Joe comes along, he's like, that's great, but I know this guy. And I'm like, great, we all know a guy, right? But he introduces me to Ben Nielsen, who is a kind of a young project manager, but he worked for Rick McLaughlin with Whitewater Water Engineers, and they have a really great history of doing some really great whitewater features. So I said, great, we'll put Ben on the team and he can be like a sub. Well, we had our first meeting and that was a complete disaster. And Jill looked at me, he's like, Laura, not good enough. So I had to politely fire the firm that I told I'd give them the work to. And that was really the best decision that we made as we move forward, because we were really able to put together a fantastic vision. And at that same time, that what was happening was the South Platte Working Group came into play. And when we talked with them and they were seeing really how do we vision the river as a whole system, that's when the big player came in with Arapahoe County Open Space. And so we'll look into the dollars that got put into this project. They were a huge partner for us. So in our plot, we're basically trying to maintain the 100-year flood. We also want to increase that regional trail conveyance because with 1 million people, it's a pretty congested trail. We are also looking at how do we optimize the river hydraulics, because as you know, it's a wide flat channel and we don't have a lot of flow most of the year. So how do we really utilize the flow that was there? And then we're also looking at how do we build new features on land for like trailheads, but also what are some new innovative ways, things that we can do in the river. So we were really looking at how do we create this unique regional park experience with this. So there's a lot of opportunity, as you can tell. This is what we had in mind. So this is what I and Joe and others went out to say, you know, how do we make this happen? What we're looking for is reshaping the channel, the Cobble Beach river access. We're also looking at that trailhead, really having a lot of comfort facilities. If you're along the South Platte River, there's really not a place to go to the bathroom. And so if you're wanting to increase use to it, you got to provide some of those facilities. We also recognize the need for parking. And then the trail, we were looking at connecting a mile of trail on the east side of the river that would be able to split the users in the reach. So that's what we moved forward with. And so we started this visioning. And so our plot was great, but then our plot got a little bit thicker because Ben got introduced to river surfing. And he said, hey, you know, there's a surf shop that just opened in Boise, Idaho. We're like, oh, well, if Boise, Idaho could have a surf shop, well, certainly we could in Denver, right? The difference, if you see this wave that's in Boise, there's a lot of water. We don't have that in the river. So we're like, okay, well, we can take this on, right? So our conflict was we needed $14.7 million. We had a technology problem that no one's actually done a standing wave with less than 200 CFS is where the range we needed. And then we also had some major permit hurdles because we're dealing with a core and a modification to one of their projects. So how we got through that, I call V2P, which is vision, passion, and partnerships. So vision, I'll just give you a quick example. You know, Ben had this idea that we could really make this happen. He believed it so much that he built a model in his garage that we took up to CSU and did about 6 months of physical modeling to really figure out how we could make this adjustable wave shaper with such a low flow condition. So I really give a lot of credit to McLaughlin, who turned into Merrick, because they really put a lot of pro bono hours in for us to make sure this technology could work. And of course, we wanted it to be very safe, no matter what the flow regime was. Passion came into play very much so when it came to get that permit. We spent 2 years going back and forth with the Corps on how to get a modification. So we would send in our application, they would give us some questions, we'd answer the questions, they would come back with more questions. We weren't getting anywhere. So we decided that we needed to go to Omaha. And so we all several of us hopped on a plane, and we went to Omaha and had a meeting for a full day of putting a plan together. And at the end of that meeting, we felt very good about having a plan that we could move forward with. The sad part of the story was that after that meeting, there was thunderstorms in Denver. And so our flight kept getting delayed and delayed and delayed. And eventually about 2 in the morning, they allow us to board the plane. We get all buckled in and they're like, sorry, the crew just timed out. So we can't leave and we've canceled the flight. It was the Omaha hosts the College World Series for baseball. So we couldn't get a flight out for 3 days, and the hotel rooms were outrageous. So several of us said, okay, well, we'll drive back. But there's only one car rental place that's open at 2:30 in the morning, and they only have 5 vehicles. We are like 10th in line. But fortunately, a woman who was ahead of us heard they had a minivan. And so she's like, does anybody want to ride back to Denver in a minivan with me? A couple of us raised our hands, somebody else raised their hand. And so we made some new friends and drove all the way back to Denver. It turned out as, again, a really great decision because we were able to move forward with the process. And so it was a fun trip. And if anybody knows Jeff Shoemaker, he was in the vehicle with us. So that can just tell you how that went. Yeah. Partnerships, I can go on all day of how instrumental it was for everybody in every part of the way to get through this. A big part of when you do something new is who's going to take responsibility for it. What we found with everyone is once one of us volunteered, quickly somebody else was there to back us and move through the process. So I'm not going to go into detail, but it was huge. I think what everybody likes to see is, how do we fund $14 million? We started out with needing 14.7. Turns out we were able to optimize some things, and 14.3 is what our budget was. It's always nice to say we're going under budget. The big blue area is Arapahoe County open space. And then as you can see, we have numerous partners who are all part of the picture. I like this graphic a little bit better that shows our budget. The blue area shows where the money came from is local governments. The orange is the special districts that participated. So special districts like qualified CWCB, as well as the district in South Suburban. And that gray corner is all the grants that we were able to pull together. So we were truly able to leverage all of our dollars in order to really make this happen. So moral of the story always, right? If you've got vision, you've got passion, you've got partnerships, you can do some awesome things. That's the end of the story, but it's not the end of the photos. So I will go through, because you always want to see what we ended up doing, right? What we started out with. And then here's a video that we put together that our contractor actually did to show you what phase one looks like. It does have just music. Yeah. A part of it, we did include some art. Working with an artist and how to mount something is always challenging. That's Oxford Avenue. Good. All right, so we actually, when you have water, we have a really awesome surf wave. This has Ben doing his thing. We were actually obviously able to do the trail connection piece. We were able to get that integrated community gathering place. Our playground was actually done by GoCo, sponsored. And then it's amazing how the youth sits out there on a weekend and even during the week. This is an average Saturday that was out. Ben showing off. But that queue line that goes back on an average day is pretty impressive. So that's our story of River Run. Happy to take any questions.
Questions for Laura? Director Goebel.
Not really a question, but a few comments. First of all, great story and congratulations. It's a really cool project. I actually worked for McLaughlin for a few years, and when this whole project was getting started, this, like you mentioned, Ben, we always design for rafts and kayaks and whatnot, and he was a surfer from California that moved here and went to work with us, and he had this idea of, well, they surf in Boise, they surf up in Montana, well, why can't we do that here and make it a man-made structure? And so that was kind of right on the beginning stages whenever I left there, but it's cool to see this project come to fruition, so good work.
Other questions, comments? Director Mitchell.
Thanks for doing this. I live near that area, and that area, Sheridan, really does need something like this. And so have you heard any impact from the businesses nearby, or are people generally happy?
It's amazing the interest we have. And even if you're out there, people are so excited. The families that are coming to this area that they didn't even know the river was that close to. There's been a lot of interest in having festivals and water safety. So I think it's going to boom, and they're trying to figure out how to do some of that economic part that goes with it. But Sheridan and Englewood are very interested in that end.
Other questions, comments? I don't believe so. Great project and great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the support that you provided this project.
Very good. All right, let's move. I'm sorry, Director Gallagher.
Posted somewhere on your website, or do you have a website, this video?
It is not. It will be soon because they're redoing our website, but I'm happy to get you something. Oh, yeah.
That'd be great, Joe, if you could get them. Yeah, everyone has a drone. Well, I think our friends in Craig might like to see that.
All right, thanks again. Let's move to agenda item number 23.
Yeah.
Where is Mr. Russell?
All right, the $90 million loan. Northern distracted me here. My apologies. Let's see, which agenda item are you on? Okay, sorry. Kirk Russell, Finance Section Chief. Going to shift gears here. The Water Plan Grant Program, I want to make sure the board is on board with, or the staff is on board with the way the board has processed these. And as we present the grant applications, to remind the board that early on we were trying to move money in this $10 million water plan grant category as quick as we could, but yet as responsible as we could be. And so in that effort, we talked about having a 2 board meeting approval process where we would bring in September a first round of vetting. The applications that were due for the September meeting were August 1st. The board heard, I think, about $3.5 million worth of grant applications in the 6 different categories. And I was excited that the board and the staff were on the same page with the applications that came in. I think the staff did an incredible job of vetting them and making sure that that the funds were being applied to the right kind of projects. After that September review by the board of the initials, we then immediately received grant applications for round number 2, and that occurred on October 1st. And so the staff has had another month and a half to vet those projects, and I think they've totaled about $3 million. And so you will hear following my presentation, those in the initial fashion. I think without exception, the staff has decided that that application dates is too many, and I think they would suggest that 2 is probably too many. But I think we've achieved our goal, and that's to get this money mobilized into some projects, start moving the needle on the water plan implementation efforts. I guess I should have mentioned, so the 3rd round of grant applications is on for the board to review those in March, and then a final approval in May. So there's another round of these for that initial $10 million. And as I indicated yesterday, the total of the applications that'll be presented to you today in that final category, and about 3 million are in the initial category. And so you'll see the initial projects in January for their final approval. And all of this then starts moving. Anything that receives final approval today will start moving through contracting and distribution of funds shortly after. And so we will hopefully start seeing some progress on that. The way we have laid out this today's board meeting, we set up the final list, and hopefully it'll move efficiently without a lot of delays. We wanted to block things together. Again, I think the board provided good feedback, and the staff understood what adjustments needed to be made. There were some projects the board wanted to hear from applicants, and I tried to identify them on our list. And I think Director Wattenberg, I owe you a couple asterisks that weren't put on those board memos. So I need to make sure I get you those so that when those items come up, and staff will remind the board that they were requested to bring the applicant to maybe answer some questions at that time.
Thanks, Kirk. I'm sure Director Mitchell can keep me on track, so no problem.
So with that, I guess my comment is that once you have reviewed those projects under that category, the staff recommendation will be to approve them in block. And if there are any modifications, then you'll be able to make those at that time.
This time. All right, I think we are ready for number 20, agenda item number 24. I would like to remind all directors, we will be doing this in block, but if there is any questions or anything else, certainly feel free to remove an item that you would like more discussion or a separate motion and vote on, and that we can go from there. Or if staff members have some questions, we can also make some adjustments. I believe the floor is yours, Brent.
Brent Newman, CWCB staff. I'll be presenting items 24 and 25. I know lunch is smelling good, and Director Mitchell has encouraged me to be expedient, so I will see what I can do to get there. 24 is items A through C, is the final consideration for the Agricultural Viability Water Plan grants. Before we get into this, I'm going to give a very brief overview of A, B, and C, and then we're going to discuss very briefly, if we can, some of the issues that have come up in the past couple of weeks with items B and C. So agenda item A from the Fruitland Irrigation Renovation Project from the Fruitland Irrigation Company. This is a salinity control project in Delta and Montrose counties. It's going to leverage a significant amount of funding from the Bureau of Reclamation. It's also going to be accompanied by a $1.7 million CWCB loan that was discussed in September, and also $900,000 of WSRF monies. This is going to be installation of 2 miles of pipe from Gould Reservoir to an ag conveyance system, and it's a pretty good project. Item B is Bobby K. Taylor Reservoir Recharge Pits from the La Plata Water Conservancy District. This is a project we discussed at the last meeting. Basically, the La Plata District is going to convey water in priority through 4 existing agricultural ditches to percolate and get the supply into Bobby K. Taylor Reservoir, formerly known as Long Hollow Reservoir. And finally, the Trainer Ditch Lining Project from the Trainer Enterprise Ditch Company is the lining of one of those 4 ditches that's going to be delivering water to the Red Mesa Aquifer Recharge Project as part of the La Plata District's project. You heard a little bit earlier yesterday from Mike Brode, who talked about some of the benefits of Long Hollow Reservoir, Bobby K. Taylor Reservoir, and how it's helped with the administration of the La Plata River Compact and with some of the issues in the basin, and sort of been an asset for DWR and their administration and operations in this basin. As part of the application project, you also had a letter from the Division 7 engineer sort of emphasizing the same things, that this really helps with the 1922 La Plata Compact. It helps DWR, and as part of the grant application, they're actually going to be helping with some different installation of water measuring devices to also help with administration in the area. Each of you, I gave a copy of a letter from CPW that we received about a month ago. So these 2 projects, B and C, both included in their application, 2 big benefits. And if you remember, the purpose of this grant program is to encourage ag viability through creative water sharing measures, be it ATMs, lease fallowing projects, but then also working with aging ag infrastructure to replace it, update it, and maybe provide multiple benefits if possible. These 2 projects included in their application the multiple benefits of compact compliance, better administration, and also potential benefits for native fishes. Director Hawkins, I also have to give kudos again, has been an awesome partner on these projects and helping work with the local people of the district, with the engineers at SGM, and also with the division engineer. So at the beginning of the project, we said, in your application, you have these benefits for native fishes. We'd like to see that sort of solidified a little more. Can you work with CPW to sort of quantify these benefits, or at least let us know if they really exist? The district and SGM as their engineers has worked very closely with CPW over the past few weeks and started to work out potential ways that this project can benefit native fish. And CPW has also, given us this letter. This letter says that after consideration of the project, they think that any benefits to native fish are negligible. They think that the existing MOU between Parks and Wildlife and DNR will not be further augmented by this project. And they have some concerns about these ag ditches taking the water out of the stream during spring runoff and the effect that may have on these native fishes. CPW also demonstrated their willingness to work with the district for mitigation projects or to provide some input on how this project could be administered for the benefit of the native fish. These discussions are ongoing. Both Director Hawkins and I have spoken with SGM as the engineers and the district over the past couple of weeks to try to come to some sort of resolution. We're not quite there yet. And that said, I'm going to turn it over to Director Hawkins to provide any comments she has on this project.
Director Hawkins.
Thank you, Brent, and thank you for your work on this. I think that Brent covered the issue pretty well, and I think what I am facing as the director from this basin is we have a project that still has a multi-purpose benefit. There are ag benefits and compacted administration benefits as the project is currently framed. I think it's very important for the other board members to know at this point the native fishery benefit that has been claimed in the application is unclear. I would say at this point, the applicant has asked us to move forward on the application. They are willing to retract the claim that there is a benefit for the fishery, which makes this have one less purpose than it did the last time the board saw this. I had really encouraged both the applicant and Colorado Parks and Wildlife to try to come to a resolution so that the fishery benefit could be retained in the application. They're just not quite there yet. And so I am happy to suggest that we vote on these projects individually. I do want to emphasize that compact administration in the La Plata Basin is incredibly difficult, and that the letter that you saw from the Division of Water Resources about the compact benefit is worth considering as we look at this application. And I don't know if Director Ryan has any comments to that end.
Thank you, Director Hawkins, but no, I would not at this time.
Further questions for
Jay Skinner with Parks and Wildlife has a couple of comments about the project.
I actually just moved up here. Okay.
Back there looming. I figured he had something to say.
Director McLeod.
I do have a question, Jay, if you could help us. I had to read Pat Dorsey's letter kind of quickly here, but I'm seeing an implication that this project could increase the risk of these fish being placed on the endangered species list. Am I reading that correctly?
Well, Jay Skinner for Parks and Wildlife. That's sort of long been our fear about these three species, as we all know from prior work on in-stream flows elsewhere in the basin. So it's not directly attributable to this project specifically, and as Brent and Celine said, that we're still talking with the applicant about some opportunities that may exist under the operation of this project, that there may be some things that we can do that are beneficial to the native fish in the La Plata. And I guess I'll also go on record to say that the MOU that we have with the district that was negotiated some years ago adequately addresses the base flow non-compact period. And I think that there remains potential as it relates to this project. So a long-winded answer to your question, but yeah.
Further questions of Brent or Jay? All right, it looks like if I'm reading this correctly, we can do agenda item 24A and 24C.
24C is a component of 24B. It's one of the ag ditches that would be diverting. I
Okay.
think doing them separately is probably a good.
Uh,
idea.
all right, let's do staff recommendation 24A.
Staff recommends approval of this grant in the amount of $350,000.
Director McLeod.
Chairman, I move that we adopt staff recommendation on item 24A.
By Director McLeod.
Second.
Second by Director Dutton to move staff recommendation 24A. Further discussion? Call for the vote. All those in favor signify by an aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Item 24B, staff is also recommending approval of $35,000 for this project.
We have staff recommendation. Director Hawkins.
I struggled with this, with these applications. I would have preferred there to be a way to include the fishery benefit in the applications, but in deference to the significant problems administering the La Plata Compact and the fact that this is still a multi-purpose project, and with a strong encouragement to the applicant and Colorado Parks and Wildlife to continue to see if there are mitigation measures that can assist with this project, I move to accept the staff recommendation.
Been moved by Director Hawkins to accept staff recommendation. Second by Director McLeod on agenda item 24B. Further discussion? Call for the vote. All those in favor signify by an aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
On agenda item 24C, staff recommendations for approval of $17,000.
Director Hawkins.
And again, with encouragement for the applicant and the La Plata District and Colorado Parks and Wildlife to continue exploring mitigation measures, I would move to accept staff recommendation.
It's been moved by Director Hawkins on agenda item 24C. Second by Director Yon. All further discussion? Call for the vote. All those in favor signify by an aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, thanks, Brent. We are to agenda item number 25.
Brent Newman, CWCB staff. This is initial consideration of more agricultural viability water plan grants. So after the approval of those three, we have $598,000 in available funds. So in the October round of applications, we received 5 applications totaling about $1.1 million of ask. So that's about double the funds that we had available in the fund. We have worked really closely with the applicants for this round of funding. And even though this is a grant program, we've called every different applicant and said, if you take about a 50% haircut on these grants, can you still get the goals of this project accomplished? Can you revise your task list? Can you work with other funding partners to get this to a yes? And all 5 applicants have said, yes, we can make this work. Our project will still work. We may have to revise the scope. So over the next couple of months before we come back for final review, the scope will look a little bit different. Some of the tasks may disappear and be supplanted by other funding sources, but all 5 of these projects are good projects and worthy of moving forward. So just as we sort of did back in Walden, I'm just going to provide a brief overview of every project. And if you have any questions about the project or the applicant or how they're going to fill this 50% gap of this lack of funding, let me know. The first project is the applicant is the Colorado River Water Conservation District working with Silt Water Conservancy District. This is the Silt Water Conservancy District Agricultural Infrastructure Improvement Project. The original request from the applicant was $200,000. We worked with them to get that down to $100,000. This is part of the Silt Water Conservancy District's master plan for greater efficiencies and updating some of their aging infrastructure in the silt area. This project, as part of this master plan, they're going to upgrade the inflow and outflow structures at Harvey Gap Reservoir, and they're also going to work with the Grass Valley Canal, which is a critical water conveyance structure as part of the silt project. They're going to be piping the canal. The silt area is in a high selenium recommending approval of 75, or we will be in January.
Questions, Director Dutton?
I had a question about the beaver-friendly structures. If
Yes.
there's are some details on what that means,
I can get that information to you
I would-
from the proponent.
I would love to see
Yeah.
it. Thank you.
All right, can do.
Can probably have that. We can probably have that discussion offline.
Yep.
Discussion offline.
And I also want to thank Director Wattenberg for his involvement in this project. He had some questions about the application early on, and he was kind enough to talk to the applicant and provide some guidance, I think.
Thank you, and thank you to the staff for the same efforts. Any further questions on D? I think we're good to move to E.
All right, last but not least, 25E is a joint project of the Colorado River Water Conservation District and the North Fork Water Conservancy District. The project is the Fire Mountain Canal Regulating Reservoir. This project is supported by the Gunnison Basin Roundtable. This project will support technical assistance activities to design and engineer a 50 acre-foot re-regulation reservoir facility as part of the Fire Mountain Canal, which is a component of the federal Paonia project. This project provides irrigation water to 8,200 acres of irrigated lands near Paonia and Hotchkiss. This re-regulation reservoir is a critical component needed to create an on-demand irrigation delivery system with pressurized deliveries to enable on-farm high-efficiency irrigation improvements in the water-short North Fork of the Gunnison. This project will be leveraging some funds from the Salinity Control Program. This is also in a high salt, high selenium area of the Gunnison Basin. It meets Colorado's water plan goals, and we do have, I think, a letter of support from the roundtable in the board members' Dropbox.
Director Hawkins.
Brent, I was wondering why this application was under the ag funding and not the storage funding.
The way it was presented to me from the river districts, and Dave Kanzer is their guy on staff there, is this is a component of the Fire Mountain Canal Project's greater water efficiency project. So they're including it in the ag instead of storage because it's kind of an integrated system. If he's listening, he could probably go there for some more funding.
It seems to me that we have funding left in storage than ag, which is why I asked the question.
Further questions? I don't believe so. With that, all these projects have passed their initial review. So with that, I believe we are done with agenda item number 25. One quick announcement: we're about to break for lunch. Normally, lunch is reserved for staff and board members. So we will reconvene at 1:25, and we are in recess for lunch. Thank you.